Hello everyone, Zeno What If here. Those that are new to the channel subscribe to see some of the content I made. Leave a comment down below for any ideas. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Link down in the description of the fanfiction of this, What If. To bring in part 11 of What If the Gate appeared in G.I. Joe. Chapter 20, Politics of Two Worlds, New Goddesses. The Marine One helicopter was flying over the Pacific Ocean waters. Inside, several girls were looking with interest. Lele was really interested about the way they've been literally flying over the waters. She could see seabirds flying nearby them. Mayui and her maids were also got excited, as well as Rory and Tuca, but Pina and her knights were not feeling comfortable, to say the least. Pina once flied the wyverns, but this was something new for her. Flying in the Iron Pegasi, which was so luxurious and belonging to one of the leaders of this world, was enough to make her panic, as if she was been rolled to the execution. Her other knights were also not feeling comfortable, especially Hamilton, who was literally scared to death, while Panache, on the other hand, liked the way they flied real fast. So, let us get ready for the business, said Centurion. As you know, we'll be soon landing on USS Vincent, where the special delegation from both UN and Japanese Diet will be waiting for us. However, it's not the delegates we should be worried about. Let me guess, snorted Scott, those goddamned liberals are gonna try to bury us in shit, right, sir? You got it, Scott, said Centurion, and just so happened, we have the worst of the worst liberals on board USS Vincent, who will do anything to have their goals reached. Sounds like the politics of your world is much more harsher than in our, said Rory. You have no idea how harsh they are, Rory-chan, said Centurion. These aren't just any women politicians, they've practically represent everything worse in today's liberalism, feminism, social demagogue, hatred towards the strong politics of your country and armed forces, attempts to blame all men in assaulting women. They are quite vicious, and determined to reach their goals by all means necessary. Sounds like a pack of Greek furies to me, said Williams. You have no idea how right you are, Corporal, said Centurion. These are the women we're about to meet. Mizuki Kuhara, member of the Diet and Japanese Conservative Liberal Party. She's an opportunist who takes advantage of every opportunity to further push her political career, when she always accuses the JSDF and ANF of attempts to establish military regime in Japan. She hates the armed forces and always uses every dirty trick in the book, from lying to falsifying the facts, to discreditize them. She usually barrages her opponent with questions as a way to get them to speak poorly of the army. She also believes that she's a professional, thus she likes to scolding her opponents of being nonchalant and disrespectful. She also seems to use her age to her advantage, where she would tell youths to respect their elders. Sounds like a typical political bitch, sir, snorted Eric. I think we might have the opportunity to expose her stupidity and incompetence. Well, that goes if you're ready to meet her American partner, answered Centurion. She's the former First Lady, you know. What? Gasped Eric. You mean Hillary Clinton? The same, said Centurion. Ever since her husband has lost the elections, she's been going on the rampage, always blaming me for deliberately ruining her husband's career. She also a strong feminist, who usually blames men for her own mistakes, and she uses her influences and money to achieve what she wants by every dirty trick in the book. She also acquired CNN, one of our country's biggest news broadcasting network, and turned it into her personal weapon against Finns and ANF. Ever since the gate appeared, she's been blasting about the idea that the gate was actually somehow my own machinations to form the ANF, and accuses me in attempts to turn United States into communist state. Thus she always yells that the NATO should be in charge of the gate. Talk about one obsessive woman, said Williams. Wait, said Pina, did you say, First Lady? As if the wife of the president. Yes, she's wife of the Bill Clinton, the former president of the United States, said Scott, but trouble is, her family life is nothing more than a scam. She didn't care when the president got involved in sexual scandal with Monica Lewinsky, one of the students in university. It was the main fact that costed President Clinton his second terms of office. So calling her the Queen isn't the right way, Your Highness. Oh, said Pina, I see. Then why does she always been so hateful towards Sir Prime? Because ever since the Atlanta Olympics, during which several American swimmers were been held hostage and then got rescued, answered Michiru, Centurion-san has been known as one of the greatest heroes in United States of America. President Clinton was always been boasting that he was the one who led the rescue operation, but everybody known the truth. During the November elections, Clinton has tried to persuade Centurion to become his political ally, but Commander has made it clear that he does not get involved in politics, he only handling war and crime fighting. Because of that refuse, Hillary has hated Centurion-san ever since. She vowed that one day, she'll ruin his career, the same he did to her husband's. Sounds like you've made yourself quite an enemy, sir, said Williams. Well, that depends on what you think of the Third Fury, this time from Russia, said Centurion, this one is a real walking scandal. Valeria Novovorskaya, the Russian opposition activist and probably the worst person on this planet. Compared to her, even Bison and von Strucker are nothing more, that pretty boys from choir. She's been always opposite to everything in her country, to every leader, every decision, as well against the military. On top of that, she's completely so stupid, that she'll probably don't know what she's doing. She also believes that America is practically the top of the world, and every country, including Russia, must obey every word from Washington. But that's absolutely insane, said Scott, this woman doesn't even understand that what she spouts is nothing more than treason. She doesn't care, answered Centurion, and she also believes that the ANF is actually President Pudilov's scheme to bring back the Soviet Union as well to start the world revolution. Hearing this, almost everyone did the facepalm. I don't fucking believe it, grumbled Eric, or we really have to endure that bullshit from this stupid woman. I'm afraid so, Eric, said Centurion, because she's part of the right defenders, who demanded the questioning in UN, the same one we're on our way now. So, as you can see, we've got a group of real tough opponents. If we defeat them, the ANF will go on more smoothly without a further delay, but if we fail, well, let's just say, we better have some warm clothing, cause the next place we'll be going is Antarctica. So no screw-ups. Yes, sir, said Scott, no screw-ups. It wasn't long, as the Marine One landed on the flight deck of USS Carl Vinson. Naturally, the natives of Falmouth was really surprised to see a literal island of steel, but not only, it was also moving without any sails. After that, several Secret Service agents came to them and directed the group down to the hangars, which were been converted into the meeting hall. It was an overwhelming experience to say the very least, as the girls were absolutely taken aback as they entered the meeting. The hall itself was grand in its own right, well lit and covered in some of the best woodwork any of them had ever seen. Within the hall, sat the representatives of every nation on Earth. From the tiny island nation of Nauru to the superpowers that had influence around the world, they were all here today to hear the testimony of these people from beyond the gate. But these diplomats were not the only ones to be witness to this commission, as many world leaders, including those from the United States, Russia and specifically, China, were watching the proceeding from their seats with Japanese Prime Minister. Whatever happened here today, would influence just how the Japanese lead ANF operated in Falmouth. After the initial opening statements and introductions were made, the commission into the actions of the coalition in Falmouth officially began. We will now begin to ask the questions of the witnesses. Secretary General Solomon Hochoi announced, Miss Clinton, you are free to begin your questioning. Soon enough, Hillary Clinton stood up and said, I will cut right to the chase. Why did 120 civilians from the special region killed, while under the supposed protection of Japanese and American troops, by a creature you call a dragon? Before I'll answer that question, ma'am, said Centurion, while standing on the podium, may I ask, where did you get such ridiculous numbers? Ridiculous, soared Hillary, by what do you mean, ridiculous, General? Because I've questioned the chiefs of those villages, answered Centurion, right after the defeat of the Flame Dragon, I've questioned the chiefs of Kota, Colton and Copperkeep villages about the losses. According to them, the exact number of fallen victims of the attack was merely 25 men, among them only 3 children. The number of the injured villagers are close to 30, which most of them got hurt because of the panic caused by the attack of the dragon. Right now, many of these injured villagers are now been healed and recovering in our refugee camp. In other words, your claim about the 120 killed civilians is ridiculous, ma'am. You can't fool me, shouted Hillary. I've got these numbers from the Human Rights Watch organization, whose members. Their members were never been allowed to go into special region nor in Ginza either. Centurion cut her off. Any sort of the information you've received was from the media. It's obvious that either you or Human Rights Watch activists had manipulated with the numbers you've read and expanded to the most ridiculous proportions. That's a lie, shouted Hillary again, or no, that the ANF has the clever ways to manipulate with the losses numbers. Lady, if you really believe that the ANF manipulates the numbers, the same way your government did with those soldiers died in Yugoslavia, Centurion shot back, while at the same time pointing out Hillary's own skeletons in the closet, you're even much bigger fool than I thought. We do not have any reasons to hide the losses, neither of ours are civilians. We sended the full reports to the governments of the countries that are members of the ANF, and they posted them in their own media. But because you're also opposite to President Marshall's government, Miss Clinton, I'm not surprised about your attempt to backlash him as well. But as they say, truth cannot be hidden for all time. Your clever ways to manipulate the numbers does not gonna make the ANF look bad, but only make you look like a liar and a fool. Hillary was now stood completely red, but also known that Centurion is right. She has nothing to fight back against the facts he represented, and she also make herself look stupid before the UN Commission and the Japanese. She has one more shot left. Still, what about the dragon? She asked. How can you justify the losses of the people you're supposed to protect? Believe me, every loss of those people that day still haunts me, said Centurion. However, the main reason they've got killed was because that dragon was no dumb animal as well. What? Surprised Hillary. You've heard me, that beast had some intellect, said Centurion. It picked the place perfectly with timing and precision. When he attacked, it used the same tactics as the modern pilots used by going from the sun, thus blinding the people down below. It was fortunate that the radars of RADATS launchers were able to pick him up and fired their missiles, thus forcing it to go land on the ground, but that wasn't enough. Those missiles only slightly hurt him, but not fatally. He then got up and unleashed his fire on the villagers, who started to panic and flee, during which many of their carriages got broke, while several caught fire. That must when those people have died, as well those others got hurt. Fortunately, we were already responded to the dragon attack and counterattacked by using our tanks, mobile suits, Autobots and our infantry anti-tank weapons. Anti-tank weapons? Asked puzzled Hillary. That's right, said Centurion. You see, during our first encounter with the dragon, we've realized that his skin is too tough for our conventional weapons. During the Battle of Ginza we've faced several wyverns, which are smaller dragons. 50. BMG was able to hurt them, while other rounds, like from rifles, couldn't even scratch them, so we were fully aware of the beast we might encounter. That's why I've ordered my men to use only anti-tank weapons against the dragon. Anything less would do no squat against that thing's skin. Miss Clinton, samples provided from the Special Region Forces after the encounter shows that these dragon scales are as strong as tungsten, capable of withstanding even the tremendous heat. Russian Ambassador Roman Malikov stated, as he held up the results provided from the testing lab. It was basically a flying tank. Demanding 0 casualties while fighting such a creature is rather unreasonable, don't you think? Very well. I have no further questions, sighed Hillary, as she returned to her seat in defeat. Huh, snorted Eric, looks like our commander has won the first round. Yeah, said Min, but the battle is far from over. Diet member Kuhara, you have the podium. Sure enough, the Japanese woman came up and called her next witness, which happened to be Williams. Corporal Williams, you were assigned to 3rd Recon during this particular incident. Were you not? That is correct, the Marine replied. Tell me, do you believe that General Prime did everything he could to save those civilians when the dragon attacked? Kuhara asked the young man. I do believe that under the circumstances, he did everything in his power to save the villagers, replied Williams. Upon learning about the existence of this dragon, he radioed the base about the situation and had provided us with the air support to assist in the evacuation. Do you think there was anything General Prime could have done differently that could have saved more lives? No, sir, the Marine replied firmly. General Prime acted to the best of his abilities on that day. Though I have to agree that we were not prepared, nor expecting such a creature to attack us. Thank you, Corporal. Next, I would like to question Lieutenant Atami from Japanese Self-Defense Force. Atami then took his therm on podium. Lieutenant Atami, begins Kuhara, were you in charge of the Japanese team in the recon unit? Yes, I am, answered Atami. Tell me, when the dragon attacked, were you also participated in counterattack? No, ma'am. Right after the dragon was been spotted, General Prime order is to take care of the civilians, only our Komatsu vehicle participated in counterattack with Lieutenant Min, who was assigned to us as a strategist specialist. Oh, why then Min was leading the attack? Because he volunteered, saying that he's got the RPG-7 with him. And he did have one, that's why Commander has allowed him to join the attack. Very well then. Tell me, do you think that the Japanese self-defense force could have done more alone in order to help the villagers? I don't think so, said Atami. You see, despite the fact that the self-defense force is quite good, neither of us had the experience we need in order to fight alone our battles. The Special Region campaign is the first real battle since 1969. Also, Centurion and his team have the advanced technologies we need to fight such creatures, like his power suits, the Autobots, the mobile suits. Without them, we might never been able to survive the dragon attack. So, I'd say, it's just like the old saying, united we stand, divided we fall. Thank you, Lieutenant Atami. Next, I would like to question Lieutenant Min. Min took his turn on the podium. Tell us, Lieutenant Min, said Kuhara, how the ANF forces are behaving in Special Region. I'd say, they doing just fine, ma'am, answered Min. We're doing our first job in other world, following the strict code of rules that dictates the war. So far, we haven't commit anything that would show our bad behavior in the Special Region. Were you the one who participated in counterattack on the dragon? Yes, ma'am. Right after our commander ordered us to go and take care of the civilians, Sergeant Major Kuwahara suggested that his Komatsu should join the counterattack as well, since they've got the PANCERFAUST-3 rocket launcher. I, on the other hand, has also decided to join them, since I've got my RPG-7 from Vietnamese army. What about the civilian deaths? Do you have any regrets about them? I certainly do, ma'am, but the problem is that we were fighting a monster who was quite equal to Godzilla. His scales were almost like a tank armor, so the only way we could fight it is by using the RPGs and missiles. I see. Next witness please. Next, Eric took the podium. Are you Lieutenant Eric Hartman, the U.S. combat specialist attached to the 3rd Recon? Yes, ma'am. How would you describe the Allied nations' forces operating in the Special Region? First of all, ma'am, started Eric, I would like to thank the United Nations Commission for allowing me to testify before the representatives of Japan and other nations, including my own. Secondly, I would like to say, that as of now the Allied nations forces has conducted in most exemplary manner, equal to my own country Marines, who's also now present with us. I proud to call the soldiers of JSDF as my brothers and sisters in arms. Hearing these news, the Japanese and American soldiers and Marines, who were watching this, has exploded themselves in battle cries and cheers to Eric's words. Were you there, when the dragon attacked the convoy? Asked Kuhara. I sure was, answered Eric, but I didn't get much of an action. When our commander has ordered us to take care of the civilians, we had no other choice than follow his orders and not engaging the dragon. Saving the fleeing refugees was our top priority. And let me tell you something, that dragon sure was no slouch when it comes to fighting. It took our best tanks, G.I. Joe mobile suits, Autobots and our Air Force to finally bring that beast down, but not without some efforts from him to fry our guys for dinner. Do you have any regrets about the civilians lost in the attack? I certainly do, ma'am. Any soldier feel regret that because of him, the casualties weren't close to zero. But I'm proud that we've been able to reduce the casualties to less further. If we weren't prepared or didn't have our support, the deaths would be catastrophic. So I believe that because we've lost only 25 civilians, it's a good sign because we've saved 300 other civilians in the process. What? Gasped Kuhara, you mean that you've been able to save 300 civilians? That's a lie, shouted another woman, looking really obese, with messy black hair and glasses. Christ, muttered Centurion, not that bitch again. Is that? Asked Lele. Yes, grimly said Centurion, gazing at the woman, that's her, alright, Valeria Novovorskaya. This woman is one hell of a scandal. That soldier boy is lying, continued her obscenities Novovorskaya, everybody knows, the Hartman is Centurion's personal lapdog. That's Lieutenant Hartman, ma'am, answered Eric, looking annoyed by Novovorskaya's insult. Miss Novovorskaya, said the chairman, please wait your turn and let the witness speak. If you interfere with the hearing once more, we'll be forced to exclude you and ask you to leave. Novovorskaya then seated down, but still looked frustrated. Like I said Centurion, a walking scandal. I see what you mean, said Rory, looking at Valeria with annoyed look. Lieutenant Hartman, continued Kuhara, did you said that you've saved 300 people? Exactly, ma'am, said Eric, considering that there were people from other villages as well, I'd say we've roughly saved about 95% of the refugees. But we didn't receive any reports about those other people, said Kuhara. Maybe, because like our commander said, somebody has manipulated with those numbers, answered Eric. Very well. I have no more questions, the Japanese replied, before she returned to her seat. Special Representatives Yitaka and Caldwell, you now have the floor. Two men entered the podium, one of them is a Native American, and other was European. Good day, gentlemen, said the European man, my name is Joshua Caldwell, and this is Charles Yitaka. We're from the International Refugees Commission. We would like to ask few questions to the representatives of the Special Region people, who's now leaving an ANF refugee camp. I know these two, said Centurion, they've been helping me with the Native Americans' problems, as well with Inuits in Alaska. Yitaka comes from the Sioux Lakota tribe, while Caldwell comes from the Canadian family. They've been working with us several times on problems like pollution and illegal corporate takeover. So, they're good guys? Asked Rory. Yes, replied Centurion, they're here to help us, unlike the Furies. I call now Miss Lele Lalina as our first refugee witness, announced Caldwell, to which the young mage took her position to speak. Miss Lalina, do you understand Japanese? Yes. In English? Yes. Very well. Caldwell began his questioning. I am told that you are currently living in a refugee camp which has been set up by the Allied Nations forces. Are there any inconveniences? I do not understand what you mean by inconveniences, the mage replied. If you mean that not everything is convenient, then that is true for everyone. I will change the question then, replied Caldwell. Do you lack anything that you require? All of my clothing, food, shelter, work and spiritual needs are being met. Lele replied. If I started to ask for more, then there'd be no end to it. Then you do feel the ANF's response in any way contributed to the result of 25 casualties? No. Thank you, Miss Lelena. Next, I would like to hear Miss Tuka Luna Marsu. Tuka then took a stand at the podium. I am an elf of the Lodo Forest clan. Tuka introduced herself, as she had now been called on to testify. I am the daughter of Hodor Ray Marsu and Marizana La Marsu, Tuka Luna Marceau. It was not long before the internet exploded with many individuals' reaction to the news that an honest-to-God elf was now speaking to the UN. Forgive me my question, Miss Marsu, but are your ears real? Yitaka asked the woman. Yes, they are. Would you like to feel them? The elf replied, as she moved her gold-colored hair to reveal her pointed ears. There was a slight commotion that swept across the assembly as she did so, as millions of Weebos and Otakus collectively lost their minds. Slightly surprised by the response he got, Yitaka continued to question. Then Miss Marceau, was there any problem in the way Centurion Prime and his men handled the dragon attack? No, I don't think so, replied Tuka. In fact, it was thanks to Centurion I am now feel safe with my family. He's the one who saved me from the well I was hiding from the flame dragon when he attacked my village of Koan. Oh, surprised Yitaka, do you mean that there were other elves from your tribe, Miss Marsu? Yes, they were, said Tuka sadly, but now, most of them were been killed by flame dragon. And are you really sure that the ANF wasn't responsible for the death of your people, Miss Marsu? No, of course not. From what I've been heard, they came only when the flame dragon was already destroyed my village. By the time they've reached it, it was already too late to help anyone, because the dragon has set the whole forest on fire. My father has wounded the dragon in the eye by his arrow in trying to defend our village, but we were completely outmatched. That's when my father threw me into the well, where he believed I would be safe. I'd stay there, in cold water, almost freezing to death, when Centurion appeared and saved me, as his soldiers saved several others. What? You telling us that there are other survivors? Yes. Only 7 from our tribe, including my father, myself and my mother. And all of them are now safe in the refugee camp. Yes. Then, Miss Marsu, let me ask you, when the dragon attacked again, did you saw Centurion and his men as not helping the villagers? No, of course not. They've quickly turned and faced the dragon, when it landed at the rear of convoy. I was also there, helping them fight the dragon. You did. Yes. I fired another arrow, that blinded the dragon's another eye, thus making him fully blind. Then, I saw Centurion's forces fighting this monster. It was unbelievable. Their powerful weapons and machines were more than enough to destroy that evil beast and avenging my people. That's quite impressive, Miss Marsu. But tell me, are there other races in your world, aside your elves? Yes, there are. There are beastmen demi-humans, half-human half-beasts, then there are dwarves, hobbits, goblins, ogres and many others. In fact, the last species we've encountered were the humans, who came to Falmart almost 2,000 years ago. You mean, they've came through the gate as well? Yes, in fact we the elves are also called the gate is the place, where our ancestors came to Falmart, as well other creatures. I see. Tell me then, how are the Empire treating the other species in your world? Tuka became real sad. Treating isn't the right word, more like they've been using us as nothing more than common tools. Some of the beastmen were been captured and turned into slaves, while others become nothing more than cannon fodder to fight Empire's wars. Others, most of the females, are become prostitutes or concubines to entertain some rich nobles and their families. Loud noises were heard, as many other delegates become really angry by hearing the young elves' words. Outside the hangar doors, many sailors and marines were also got vocal, yelling angry words about Empire mistreat of the natives of Falmart. It seems that everything Centurion said about the Empire before the start of the operation was true, and it angers them. Someone's gonna pay dearly for this. The internet users were also got angry, as the whole net was now bustling with angry notes and words about the Empire. Thank you, Miss Marsu, spoke Yitaka. I hope you and your other friends are enjoy the stay in our world. And we promise you this, we won't let the Empire got away with what they've done to the natives of Falmart. They'll know that our law has long hands, and we have many ways to make them pay for what they did. We will make sure that all demi-humans and others have their freedom, and those brutes, who humiliated you, tortured and mocked you, shall have what's coming to them. Thank you, Mr. Yitaka, answered Tuka, to which everyone in the hangar applauded loudly. After that, Novovorskaya herself took the floor. Next witness, Rory Mercury. A wicked grin suddenly formed on the obese woman's face, as she saw what appeared to be a young child in the black attire. Black clothes and a veil, she must be mourning someone who was killed in the attack. This is perfect, she grinned, this will be the nail I need to finally get that Centurion off his perch and get revenge for that humiliation he did to Hillary. What is your name, miss? Rory Mercury. The apostle said flatly. Can you please describe your life in the refugee camp? Valeria asked her. It's very simple, really. Rory began to explain, as Lele continued to translate. I wake up. I live. I pray. I receive life. I pray. And then at night, I sleep. Receive life? Novovorskaya asked curiously. Yes. The apostle replied. I eat, I kill, I make offering O Emroy, a lot of different things. I'll reword the question. Valeria replied hastily. From the way you have dressed, it seems that you may have lost someone who was very close to you. So do you feel as I that the ANF under Centurion's command is responsible? She says she does not understand the question. Lele translated back. Rory's family. According to reports, despite the fact that almost 1/4 of the refugees being killed in the attack, Centurion and his men did not suffer in casualties or injuries at all. Novovorskaya stated, cutting the mage off. The people who were supposed to defend you defended you places their lives first and as a result, caused those civilian deaths in the first place. Why that goddamned bitch, growled Eric, she's manipulating the deaths of those poor people to her own favor, like some stinking Volter. And she just called us a cowards. Nobody calls US Marine a coward and get away with this. Rory was taken aback by this woman's statement and flinched a bit, causing Novovorskaya to smile as if she was victorious. So, tell us, she shouted triumphantly, what did you really see? Expose this conspiracy and Centurion's true colors. Brother, is she's asking for it, chuckled Centurion. Novovorskaya was all but shouting by now, as she believed that she has reached her goal. Certainly she had showed just how inept the Allied nations' forces were with Centurion and GI Joe in the lead. It was only a matter of convincing the Assembly that a NATO peacekeeping force led by America was the only logical solution, but that did not happen, as Rory then leaned to the microphone and shouted back loudly as she can. Are you fucking shitting me, you goddamn stupid bitch? Many in the Assembly covered their ears in pain, as the feedback noise filled the Assembly hall. Only Centurion, Haruka, Michiru, Setsuna, Eric, Min, Scott and several Marines were not affected, as their ears were got used to loud noises, like explosions. What did you just said? Novovorskaya gasped out in surprise. I asked, if you were stupid, replied Rory. Her trademark grin forming on her face, something that did not go unnoticed by Atami. Little girl. You speak English. In Japanese and even Tagalog. Replied Rory, as she took off her veil. That does not matter, you want to know how they fought and killed a dragon, right, little girl? They did their absolute best. They charged right towards the creature, with Centurion yelling that they needed to get it away from the Kota villagers and they most certainly did not use them as shields as much as you want to believe. They got the dragon to move its focus away from the villagers and towards them, ensuring the surviving villagers were able to get away. But to begin with, what is wrong with soldiers wanting to stay alive during a battle? Rory continued, her gaze never leaving the woman before her. If they died needlessly, then who are gonna protect people like you? Who'd nothing but sit in comfort and complain, little girl. I'll be damned, said Min, looking with excitement, look at her roasting that bitch. Little girl, Novovorskaya growled out silently, starting to get annoyed by this little child's taunt. Actually, I am quite surprised at you. You and your people are trying to make Centurion and his men look bad, while you sit comfortably in your luxurious offices, eating exquisite food and drinking fine wine, while the people out there died for your comfort. Your liberal way disgusts me. You use lies and false facts to blind those who risked their lives to save other lives, while for you, only your own life is matter, the rest are nothing more than obstacles in your ways. Do you know what we do to the liars in our world? We have them tied up to the stakes, so the crows can feed on their flesh. Centurion and his men may be different from our warriors, but they represent the finest species of their world, a soldier. A soldier does not question his own authority, he does not sell his life for money or do some working in the field. Like a peasant, he fights his wars for the people he protect and the nation he lived, and he always ready to give his life for his people. That exactly what Centurion and his GI Joe are, the soldiers, who fight for their own world, for the people, who sended the best of the best to defend themselves against the enemy, who threatens their own lives. He and his men fought and killed the mighty flame dragon, a creature of absolute destruction, that no one was able to kill before. Not even the Empire's mightiest armies could claim such a feat, and you should be praising them for that fact alone. Yet, you prefer to lie about them and slander them by any means possible. If that's what it's like to be a soldier in your world, then you're even more pathetic than the Empire. You said that 1/4 of the refugees were killed. Wrong. More than 3/4 of the villagers were saved by Centurion and his men. All of whom are now forever grateful for their actions. If you cannot even understand that, then the soldiers of your world must have a very hard time. They succeeded in something no one else in my world has ever done. That is my answer to your stupid question. Do you understand that, little girl? The hall is absolute silent by this point, as many in the assembly were both shocked and impressed by Rory's statement. None more so than Atami and his group, were not immune to the shock. While on the outside, the sailors and marines shouted praises towards Rory, who's finally said the words about them to those stupid liberals. You don't seem to know just how to talk to your elders. Novovorskaya growled out in reply. How dare a child like her speak to her in such a manner, little girl? Are you referring to me? Who else could it be? Novovorskaya shot back in anger. I don't know how it works in the special region, but here we are taught to respect our elders, little girl. A look of horror soon flashed upon Atami's face, as he saw Rory grin, but then she just shook her head. You really believe I'm little? Well, I may have some bad news for you, little girl. I've been here for a long time, even before your parents were born. Or you're saying that you're more older than me, yelled Novovorskaya. Older, chuckled Rory, comparing a little girl like you to me is like comparing a flea to an elephant. Yes, I'm much older than you. And just how old then are you, anyway, snapped back Novovorskaya. It's rude to ask the woman her age, you know, answered casually Rory. I'm 961 years old, honey. This answer has made Novovorskaya speechless, as well as everyone else that heard, who did not know. She was standing with her mouth open, do not believing what she just heard. Then, she muttered something. And how old is Tuka? 165. The elf replied. Fearfully, Novovorskaya looked at Lele and asked. And you? I'm only 15. The mage replied. And I am human, our lifespan is between 60 to 70 years. Almost all the residents in our world are human. Tuka is elf, they do not age and live very long lives. She is a rare fairy type who live almost eternally. Rory was originally human, but when she became a demigod, her body stopped aging and after 1,000 years or so, her kind abandons their physical existence, becoming first spirits and then gods. Thus the concept of a lifespan does not apply to her at all. If the internet did not explode before, it most certainly did now. Many of the users were sending messages like, a goddess has descended, hell yeah. Miss Novovorskaya, does this conclude your questioning? Hochoi asked the liberal woman. Defeated, she just nodded before returning to her seat. Her plan, as well the plan of other Furies to humiliate the ANF had completely backfired. Now, she would have to face the consequences for it. Ha, PWNED, snorted Eric, watching the woman he was now really despising going back to her seat. After that, the meeting took a break, while the guests went outside. Rory, for her part, was been praised by Sailor and the Marines, who congratulated her for well-spoken words about the servicemen, which made her very uncomfortable. It's like these people has become the followers of Emroy, she said to Centurion. Rory, don't be ridiculous, answered Centurion, they only thanking you for saying those words for them. They've been constantly mocked by the liberals, who slander them in worst cases possible. No one has spoke the word in their defense, only you, Rory-chan. As of now, you're practically has become the mascot of the Earth's armed forces, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I don't want to attract so much attention to me, whined Rory. That's ridiculous, snorted Scott, Centurion's right, Rory, like it or not, as a demi-goddess and apostle, you've practically earned yourself a lot of respect from our guys. And I wouldn't be surprised, if the same thing happened to those other apostles, once they come to our world. That's how things works in our world, Rory. You've earned the people's trust, now you must continue to live that way. Well, okay, said Rory, looking at Centurion, as long as I does not get too much of a praise for me. After an hour break, the meeting has resumed. With the main task was been completed, now the UN Commission was ready to listen other people from special region. Curiously, Hillary Clinton and Valeria Novovorskaya was not present, when the assembly was recalled, as they left the USS Vincent for health reasons. Now, it was time for the next people to step in. Countess Mayui Formal of the Principality of Italica. Upon hearing her name, the young countess walked to the podium with her maids in tow. The appearance of the cat girl and the bunny warrior caused a bit of a stir within the hall, but not so much to disrupt the proceedings. Please state your name for the record, the chairman asked the child. I am Countess Mayui Formal of the Formal clan and Viceroy of the city of Italica, said Mayui confidently, as she stood at the podium. Countess Mayui. Hochoi began, I was informed that once learning of this commission, you personally requested to meet with us. The young countess nodded before she replied. Yes, I did. I thought that it would be ideal to meet with the governments that were responsible for freeing my city and its people from the influence of the Sateran Empire. Miss Formal. The ambassador for China began, as he stood up from his seat. Prior to the coalition's military actions in Falmart, wasn't your city a part of the empire? A somber expression soon came upon the countess' face. She was silent for a few moments before she replied. I am afraid that was the case for many centuries before your people came. Italica was once a prosperous city-state and under the direct governance of my family. But one day the empire invaded our lands in an attempt to expand their borders, and defeated our army within a day before Emperor Augustus County Caesar asked for our surrender. My ancestors feared what would happen to Italica and its people if they were to refuse, so they were forced to yield to Sidera's demands and swear allegiance to the imperial family. The only reason my family was allowed to remain in control of Italica was because under the treaty, several of my great-grandaunts were forced to become concubines for Caesar and his sons. There were some murmurs that came from the assembly, as they learned about the fate of some of the formal clan members. While social media exploded once again, though this time in disgust and anger. So you and your clan were forced to become subservient to Sidera? The Chinese delegate asked, because in the aftermath of the Battle of Ginza, Japanese soldiers has recovered several banners that were later identified as belonging to Italica. The only thing which linked those men to Italica were those banners. Mayui shot back angrily, causing some to jump. After Italica's subjugation, we were banned from creation our own army. What your people encountered were imperial soldiers, that only marched under our colors. They did not march under the command of the formal clan. Well then. Ho Choi managed to reply, after recovering from the young countess' outburst, so the allied nations' forces under the leadership of Centurion Prime did not force you to break ties with the imperial government. Sir Prime only came to me to offer some help against the bandits, who was besieging my city, as well offer us a trade agreement with the refugee town they've built at nearby Alnus Hill. Mayui replied with a smile. However, the decision to break away from the empire has came after Sidera failed to protect us after the Italica garrisons was been destroyed at the Alnus Hill. I've sended numerous messages to Sidera begging for help, but all we got were nothing more than constant saying that everything's fine, and Sidera will protect Italica. Only Princess Pina and he knights came to our help, but without some combat experience, they were no match against the battle-hardened bandits, who were mostly former imperial and other kingdoms' soldiers. Ironically, we've been able to hold on for 3 days, but at the end of it, we were practically had no strength to face another attack. It was ANF and Centurion Prime, who really saved us. He and his men didn't ask questions, that just offered to help us and didn't ask for anything in return. After that battle was won, his commanders agreed to help protect my city and the lands around it from any more bandit attacks, or even reprisals from the Empire. But the final nail in the coffin was the letter Centurion's agent Sam Fisher has taken from the bandit leader's archive. That letter has shown that Emperor Molt Saul Augustus was making deals with the bandits. He did what? Gasped the chairman, making others as well to be shaked. That's right, said Mayui. According to the letter, Molt has offered the leader of the bandits Callus Hoba to become the new lord of Italica, once he's taking it. He's also should be using those bandits as the replacement for the imperial troopers, that were already gone, and use them to conduct imperial, scorched earth, policy throughout my lands. It was the final straw, that exhausted my patience. Not only Molt didn't even bother to help us, he's also betrayed us to those bandits, like some rags on the market. As a viceroy of the Italica, I have an obligation to protect my lands from any threat. That's why I've decided to cooperate with the ANF leaders to finally break my ties with Sidera and regain our independence. So, as you can see, my decision to break free from Sidera has nothing to do with Sir Prime and ANF. There was a moment of silence as the commission allowed what Mayui had said to sink in. Apparently she had nothing but high praise for the Centurion and the ANF he lead, while at the same time she openly denounced the imperial government of Sidera. If anyone were expecting Countess Mayui to openly denounce the coalition forces currently operating in the special region, they were greatly disappointed. At the same time, many people got angry at the fact that Molt has betrayed the young countess and practically handed her to some bloodthirsty criminals. Such vile acts of betrayal were way beyond any human standards. In other words, this has only deepened the pit for Sidera, which was already in. Thank you, Countess, that would be all. We at the UN are glad to hear that your nation is finally free from tyranny of the Empire. We will assure you that we'll make sure that your city will be fully saved from the Empire. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, bowed my UI, before she goes back to her seat. Finally, it was time for Princess Pina to take her turn. Please state your name for the record. General Secretary Ho Choi asked the woman now standing at the podium, as he and the rest of the assembly waited for her reply. This was now the main event the entire United Nations Commission was waiting for, and they were all eagerly waiting to hear just what this VIP had to say. By this point, it was more or less well known that the ANF was in no way responsible for the death of the villagers from Kota, Colton and Copperkeep, and that Thry had, but there were still many questions that needed to be answered. Questions that Princess Pina County Lotta of the Imperial Sateran family could answer. Needless to say, the royal could not remember just when she had felt so nervous in her life. She felt as if millions upon pairs of eyes were burning through her soul, which was not exactly far from the truth. She was after all speaking to this world's United Nations, and this meeting was being broadcast around the planet after all. Your name, Miss, the native of Australia asked the princess, as she looked down on her from his position, for the record. I am Princess Pina County Lotta, spoke Pina, third child of Emperor Molt Saul Augustus and Countess Nell. There were a few murmurs from the assembly and even a few chuckles before Ho Choi continued on. Let me make one thing clear, this is not an official peace conference. At present the G.I. Joe lead ANF is in control of the current military operation in your world, and the war is still ongoing. However, if both parties do come together to discuss a peace treaty, then the United Nations will be willing to moderate such a meeting. Is that understood? Yes, said the princess, as she soon realized that things were much more complex than she would have hoped. Very good, then let's begin. Ho Choi replied, before bringing out some files which had been provided by the coalition leadership. From what we understand, your empire actively practices slavery and often launch wars with the sole intent of gathering slaves. Is this true? Pina was shocked by the man's question. She was prepared to do whatever she could to end this war against her people, but the princess was not prepared to defend Sidera's actions in regards to slavery. Yes, it is true. Then the Empire's invasion into our world was indeed another attempt by your government to gather more slaves. Ho Choi asked the princess before him, a stern expression forming on his face as he spoke. Yes, said Pina, although I must stated that this decision was my father's all alone. What? Surprised Ho Choi, what do you mean, your highness? I was told by my brother Diabo el Caesar, said Pina, that when the gate appeared on the Alnus, the news were quickly reached Sidera. It was then my father has begun to summon his generals and announce to them that he was planning to send forces through the gate. And the generals have agreed with the emperor. Yes, although there was one major problem. Problem, your highness. Yes. You see, Alnus was been considered to us as a holy land, which belonged to Hardy, goddess of the underworld. No mortal has dared to even set foot close to Alnus without God's permission. So, when the gate appeared, it would naturally means that only by the blessing of the God's apostle, who represent their lords, anyone can enter the gate. Yet Molt still decided to send his forces through the gate. Yes, according to my brother, father claimed that the reason why gods have allowed the gate to be opened was because they support his endeavor to send his forces into barbaric world and civilized it. Civilized it, snapped Chinese diplomat. You mean, conquer and enslaving it. My nation's embassy was been ransacked, the people who seek their shelter were been slaughtered, and our nation's ambassador was been brutally killed. Yes, I've already been told by Sir Prime about that tragedy, said Pina, bowing her head, and I personally apologize for the death of your ambassador and those people. However, you should know that I have nothing to do with this tragedy. Before the gate was been opened, I was busy inspecting the far regions of our empire. When I heard the news about the gate opening and my father's decision to send his forces through the gate, I've rushed back to Sidera as fast as I could. You were returning to Sidera to stop your father, asked Ho Choi. Yes, said Pina, because I knew that my father has committed the ultimate sin. Since no one has allowed to enter the Alnus Hill without blessing from the gods, such actions could only means blasphemy and ended up with the punishment from the gods. However, by the time I've got back to Sidera, the ANF forces has already crossed the gate and destroyed Senator Godeson's forces, which were sended to repel the invaders. What did you do then, Your Highness? Asked Hochoi. I went into Imperial Senate. When I've heard it, that my father was holding a meeting, answered Pina, I've demanded from him the explanation. Why did he send our forces into the gate? But he continued to say, that he acted because he believed, that the opening of the gate was blessing itself. He also stated, that he sended his vassals to keep the enemy busy, while he rebuilt his army, but I've said, that the enemy just might make the vassals join him instead. And it did happen. Yes. After the deaths of several kings, other kings led by King Duran has learned about father's treachery and decided to make peace with Sir Prime's forces. They've then declared their kingdoms neutral and helped the ANF to find their people. In return, ANF has provided them protection from the empire. So your father has betrayed King Duran, same as he did with Countess Mayui. Yes, to my great shame. But that's not even the worst part of it. Go on, Your Highness. After the defeat of the allied kingdoms, my father has sended me and my Knight Order of the Rose into Alnus province, so I would gathered information about the enemy. He also ordered me to inspect Italica, because, as he said, the Imperial Army needs a new base to retake Alnus province. Little did I know, that it was nothing more than a trap. A trap, yes. You've heard it about the letter been captured by Sir Prime's spy Sam Fisher. Yes, we do know, that in that letter, Molt was planning to give Italica to the bandits. Then you must know, that in the same letter Molt, my own father, has planning to give me to Kalis Hoba as his concubine and bride. Upon hearing those words, everyone in the commission gasped in horror and disgust. You mean, that, yes, my very own father has betrayed me, his own daughter, by selling me like some cheap slave to that madman Hoba. This is an outrage, cried the German ambassador. What kind of a father is this, who sell his own daughter to some criminals? Not to mention, that he's already betrayed others, like his vassals and Countess Mayui, who is just a child, added the French ambassador. Such crimes are even beyond all borders of good and evil. This madness cannot continue, said the Russian diplomat. I vote, that we should give Centurion Prime and ANF enough forces to finally finish with this inhumane emperor. Now, gentlemen, said the American ambassador, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think, we should use the help of Princess Pina to use other means to topple such disgraceful rulers. After all, there should be those in your Senate, Your Highness, that oppose the reckless politics of the emperor. Why, yes, said Pina, we do have several of those, who does not like the emperor's cult of war. Then I say, we need to speak with those people and make them see the light, said the Chinese ambassador. They must understand, that fighting against the ANF is futile, and the war for the empire is practically over. Let them put some heat for Molt and his warmongers and make them stop this useless war. I agree with my Chinese comrade, said the Russian delegate, so I vote for that decision as well. Gentlemen, said Hochoi, I understand your valiant endeavor, but we cannot be hasty about it. We shall take this matter into General Assembly in New York, where we shall discuss it with others. In the meantime, I suggest, that Her Highness Princess Pina should speak with the presidents of the big three nations, as well with the foreign ministers. This will be much more easier for us to proceed with the attempts to make Sidera surrender. There was a lot of nodding with other delegates, as others agreed with General Secretary. Then it's done, said Hochoi. Your Highness, we thank you for the information you've provided to us. We now understand, that you're not responsible for Ginza incident, unlike your father. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, bowed her head Pina. However, you must understand, continued Hochoi, that as the imperial princess, you are also responsible for the fate of your nation, so it's now up to you to make peace between ANF and the empire. Yes, Mr. Chairman, nodded Pina, I understand. Thank you, said Hochoi. Well, gentlemen, I thank you all for joining us today for this meeting. Now that we've heard all we need to hear, we shall take this matter to the UN headquarters in New York, where the session of General will be held in few days. As for now, our meeting is hereby closed. Thank you, and goodbye. With all said and done, everyone now leaves the hangar. As Centurion and his group reached the flight deck, they suddenly saw the presidents and Momotaro near Marine One. You mind, if we tag along with you, said President Marshall. Not at all, sir, answered Centurion, after all, this is your helicopter. Then we better get going, said Momotaro. Miss Pina has an appointment with Japanese Vice Minister Shirairi, American Special Envoy Russell and the Russian and Chinese ambassadors, who's waiting for us at Yokosuka Naval Base. Okay, Momo-kun, said Centurion, you've heard him, folks, get inside. We've got a long flight ahead of us. Following Centurion's orders, the knights, soldiers, the girls and the leaders got inside the helicopter, which spinned his blades and flied away from aircraft carrier. As the helicopter landed at Yokosuka base, Pina and her knights got out and saw Lieutenant Colonel Mihara. Welcome back, Your Highness, she said, please, follow me, we don't have much time. Lady Octavia, Vice Minister Shirairi, U.S. Special Envoy Russell and other ambassadors are waiting for us. Entering the familiar main hall, Taylor took note that Lady Octavia was not seated in her customary place at the head of the long table. Across from Octavia were seated 5 individuals who were definitely not Saturans. Taylor assumed the woman seated across from Octavia was Vice Minister Reiko Shirairi. Next to her was a tall man graying hair and wizened eyes that Taylor recognized immediately. Henry Russell was, to say the least, a bit old-fashioned in his approach to campaigning. Where Senator Joseph Durrell had been a master of the 30-second sound bite, the former Secretary of State was at his best in a debate. Those skills had brought him close to becoming President of the United States, but he chose to become next President's aide-de-camp in foreign affairs. And now it appeared that the career statesman and diplomat was President Marshall's representative on the Falmart question. Taylor wished him well. The third individual, seated on Mr. Russell's left, was introduced as Koji Sugawara of the Japanese Foreign Ministry. Next, was the Russian Special Ambassador Ruslan Novikov and Chinese Special Ambassador Dao Junwang. Octavia rose with pride. Madam Vice Minister, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Sugawara, may I introduce to you, Her Imperial Highness, Princess Pina Countilata. Pina smiled and gave a slight nod to Lady Octavia. Privately, Pina had to admit just how much she envied the older woman's apparent calm. Not only surviving among people who had no reason to wish her well but apparently thriving. Octavia took a moment to address a family issue. My daughter Lucilla and my sons Antonius and Marcus all wanted to be here when you arrived, but there are serious matters to discuss first. I promised them you would be here for dinner, but again, weighty matters set before us first. She turned to the Vice Minister, who addressed Pina with courtesy but also frankness. These will not be formal peace talks, but we can hopefully establish a solid foundation for such talks. Mr. Sugawara and I will represent Japan. Mr. Russell is here at the behest of our American allies, while Mr. Novikov, Russia, and Mr. Wang, China, and of course, we appreciate both the efforts of Lady Octavia as hostess for these discussions and your own efforts, Your Highness. Your willingness to come here gives us hope that a satisfactory resolution can be made to the current unpleasantries and possibly someday, a more rewarding and mutually beneficial future can be created. Octavia then gestured for one of her household maids to withdraw seats for Her Highness, Lady Hamilton, Boses, and Panache on Octavia's left. Lieutenant, Colonel Mihara told Taylor. I'm certain you remember where the rec lounge is. You and Sergeants Tomita and Kuribayashi can avail yourselves of the facilities while the discussions are in progress. Yes, ma'am. Taylor acknowledged the dismissal. Diplomacy, like all forms of war, was best left to the professionals. Attention on deck, Chief Richardson barked, saving more than one man from letting slip an unfortunate comment in Taylor's presence as everyone bolted upright. As you were people, smiled Taylor. Just remember those girls are like my little sisters. Lieutenant, you know those girls? Petty Officer Sanchez asked. Like I said, like my little sisters. Begging your pardon, sir, a petty officer second remarked, gesturing to Rory Mercury, but she doesn't act like anybody's little sister. That's because she's the apostle of death. I watched her kill 20 men with a halberd as if she was doing a ballet. What's a halberd, Lieutenant? The petty officer asked. It's a long, heavy-bladed weapon that dices, slices and makes tons of julienne fries out of idiots who don't get out of her way. Meanwhile, in the meeting hall, Princess Pina was immensely grateful to have the sharp mind of Hamilton at her side. The form of the high tongue used here was reasonably close to what they used at home, but reasonably close still left room for error, and that, above all else, Pina was well aware she had to avoid. The empire was not a nation that excelled in diplomacy in the way most nations understood it. For centuries, diplomacy consisted of what the empire wanted and making it clear how far they would push to get it. This was different. They had finally run up against nations that could not be threatened and bullied by imperial might. Japan, Russia, China and America were nations that could crush the empire with ease if they chose to do so. That they had not yet done so offered Pina a small hope that she might save the empire, although it was dawning on her that there were many living in its lands who would shed no tears if the empire was destroyed. If having Hamilton at her side was a blessing in this discussion, then the presence of Lady Octavia was truly a gift from the gods. The older woman was an anchor of calm, and she had apparently garnered a good amount of trust and respect from the Japanese, Russians, Chinese and Americans. Pina had many things she wanted to ask her later, but for now, she merely envied Lady Octavia's skill at guiding the discussions. It was also apparent that someone had spent considerable time with Octavia discussing issues that might come up well ahead of time. Your Highness, Madam Vice Minister, before we move on to the issue of prisoners and detainees, Octavia made the slightest ironic smile at that. I should address the concept of reparations. Namely that while it would be altogether appropriate for the empire to make a considered redress to the victims of the Ginza incident, that not only has the empire already suffered serious loss in life that will affect the empire for the next generation on all levels of society, but that I will caution, she said, addressing those on the other side of the table. There are practical limits to just how much the empire can do without dangerously destabilizing itself. This could lead to unnecessary grief later. I understand that the fall of what you call the Weimar Republic was partially a result of such heavy a burden. Pina certainly had no idea what this Weimar Republic was, but the Japanese, Russian, Chinese and American representatives clearly understood the reference, with Mr. Russell leaning back with a nod and an appreciative smile. You seem to know a fair amount about our history. Thank you. It helps make understanding each other easier. Certainly, peace must be based on understanding each other. Very true. Russell agreed. Of course, ending a war should be seen beyond simply defeating an enemy if one can seize the opportunity to make an ally instead. Don't you agree, Your Highness? Pina took to this with enthusiasm. Yes, absolutely. Pina was not certain of how she would convince her father or the Senate to see things in that light, but this was a path that would assure the survival of her nation. And now on the topic of prisoners and internees. Vice Minister Shirayuri announced. Currently, our governments are holding approximately 17,000 military prisoners. Also, there are 4,000 non-military internees in the care of the American government. This total included prisoners taken during the battles at Alness as well as the Ginza invasion. That's 21,000 imperial citizens, Hamilton exclaimed. Speaking of which, Octavia commented, Your Highness can be assured that we have been treated quite well. Not only those of us considered non-military, but I have been allowed to see my husband who was severely injured in the initial invasion. He is recovering and I have no reason to believe they have been anything less than diligent in his care. Russell nodded. We have very firm laws governing the treatment of prisoners. And how much to get them back? Pina asked in a calm and businesslike tone. Prisoner ransom was certainly a concept the empire knew well. We do not engage in the practice of prisoner ransom, and we will be happy to release a small number as a sign of good faith. Also, we are obligated to release civilian internees at the earliest practicable time, Shirayuri replied. To which Lady Octavia shook her head. At present, I must suggest that it would not be wise for us to return to the empire. She turned to Pina. Our position here might tend to make us suspect to those who inevitably will not want peace. Our families and lands would be easy targets. Pina considered this. Though part of her wanted to insist that no one could be so insane as to wish to continue a war with nations so much more powerful than her own, she had to recognize that peace might be a harder sell to both her father and the Senate than she wanted to believe. Her father could not be seen as acting from a position of weakness, and the Senate had a mix of those who either feared damage to their own power if branded a coward or might actually be unable to understand and accept that the empire was in a completely untenable position. Very well. I would wish to have your steady counsel close at hand, my lady, but I understand your position. Thank you, Your Highness. I have some thoughts about the governance of my house in my absence, but they are better suited until after we finish our official discussions for the day. As for military prisoners, Sugawara noted, we have catalogued all known names here. He slid over 2 heavy-bound volumes. We would be prepared to release a few prisoners immediately as a show of good faith. And a reciprocal act on our part, Pina noted. Sitting at the end of the imperial delegation, Panache looked apprehensively at the 2 large volumes. 17,000 names, she mentally gasped. That was more than 1 in 10 of the soldiers that the Empire had marched through the gate. It is possible my brother's name could be written there. And if it isn't? We wish to look over the names first, of course, Pina noted. Certainly. Now as that concludes the formal list of topics, is there anything else we should discuss? The Vice Minister asked. Actually, Lady Octavia smiled. I do have a matter of family concerns to be addressed. While at the same time, Centurion was having a meeting of his own with Presidents Marshal, Pudilov, Chairman Shi and Prime Minister Tsurugi. I must admit, you've made quite an excellent progress there, Commander, said Marshal. I've never thought you would convince an imperial princess to cooperate with us. Well, it wasn't my own effort that caused this, sir, replied Centurion. It was actually sheer luck and her own father's stupidity that brought her here. Yes, grumbled she, I still cannot believe that a man like him would betray his own daughter. I mean, it's one thing to propose her hand to some prince or king, but a bandit. That's just about enough to make my stomach turn. This Molt has got to be one really cruel man. Well, according to what we've learned about Emperor Molt lately, said Centurion, he's practically isn't the brightest man in the Empire. In fact, he's known for making one stupid mistake after another and never learn from them. In other words, he's a buffoon on the throne, concluded Pudilov, so, that would means, if we knock him off the box, we can finally get one step closer to ending this war. Well, I'm afraid, there's the problem, gentlemen, said Centurion, according to Lady Octavia and Princess Pina. Molt has 2 sons, who's much closer to the throne, Zorzel and Diabo el Caesar, especially Zorzel, who's practically Molt's firstborn son. And what can you say about these 2, Commander? Asked Marshal. For Diabo, I would say, he's much of a level-headed fellow, said Centurion. He wants power, but thinks too much. If we can offer him a suitable place in the new Sateran government, he'll gladly join our side. It's Zorzel we need to worry about. Not only he's cruel, as his father, but also he's brutal and wicked. I've heard from that bunny girl Parna, that it was Zorzel, who led the imperial forces against the warrior bunnies. So, he's a warrior, asked she. Warrior, my ass, snorted Centurion, he's a bully, who prefers to attack in mass the helpless opponent, and cowardly runs, when his opponents are too strong. He won that war by tricking the queen of the warrior bunnies Taiuli to surrender to him, and then he lied to other bunnies that she betrayed them. According to Parna, he still holds Taiuli as his slave and constantly raping her. What a scoundrel, swore Pudilov, so, he likes to rape other women. Yes, and according to Lady Octavia, he's known as Hyena of Sidera, said Centurion, because he constantly takes other women and takes them to his palace, where none of them would return. Christ, what a scumbag, swore Marshal. I'll bet, he's also tried to rape Pina as well. He tried, scorned Centurion, but she instead beat him into a pulp, thus making him scared of her for life. Ha, I like that, chuckled Marshal, as well the others, so, the girl has some fire after all. Yes, I think, she can easily form the opposition against Molt we need, said she, but the big question is, what would Molt will do? Well, the way I know about Molt, said Centurion, his days are practically numbered. He's already proven that he's unfit to lead the empire, considering that he's been making one fatal mistake after another. So, the only logical choice for Molt would be leaving his throne and let Zorzel to become new emperor. That way, Molt would still control the empire from behind his son's back. As if been power behind the throne, asked Momotaro. Precisely, answered Centurion. However, if I'm not mistaken, Zorzel is not the kind of fellow who would allow himself to be manipulated. So, he would remove Molt from the picture, thus allowing him to reign supreme. A royal coup? Asked Pudilov. Exactly, answered Centurion. Pina already mentioned that there's several ways for the emperor to remove the opposition during the time of crisis. One of which is to call a special force called the Sweepers to remove internal enemies. You mean, causing the reign of terror, said Marshall. Exactly, said Centurion. I'm sure he would gather all the power he need from those who wanted to continue the war. The militaries, warmongering nobles, slavers, financial and industrial magnates, all of them would support the course of war, no matter who would lead it. Either Molt or Zorzel, it doesn't matter. So, that could lead to a civil war in Empire. I see, sighed Momotaro. So, what's our best solution to this, Commander? First, I suggest that we should not interfere with anything that will going on between Molt and Zorzel, said Centurion. Their domestic little squabble for power is none of our concern. Second, we should support those who seeks peace with us, especially the members of the Senate. According to Octavia and Pina, there are two major groups in Senate, the Doves, the peace-loving party, and the Hawks, the warmongers. And you suggest that we should support the Doves, Commander, said Marshall. Precisely, answered Centurion, but at the same time we should granted any sanctuary for them and their families, should they fall under the reprisals of the new regime, thus allowing us to form a government of those who would bring peace to the empire. And third, we should assist this new government in fight against the Hawks. After all, their enemies are our enemies as well. With our help and the support of the new government, we should be able to quickly put an end to Zorzel and the warmongers' attempts to continue the war. Agreed, said Marshall. Then this is exactly what we shall do. Hope that Princess Pina would be smart enough to lead this new government. Now, about our next issue. You said to us that we need to concentrate on the gods of Fulmart, Commander. Exactly, sir, replied Centurion. As I've already said in my report, Rory Mercury has mentioned that the gods has some special plans for us. What plans? Asked Pudilov. I don't know, answered Centurion, but there must be a reason. Why did they allow to open the gate? Also, according to the locals, the Alnus Hill, where gate is located, belongs to goddess of the underworld Hardy. Yes, we know, said Marshall. You've mentioned to us that Rory hates Hardy. Yes, and I've already told you why, said Centurion, but that's not all. Remember what I've said about other apostles. Yes, that every god there has its own apostle, said she. Then you should know that Hardy's apostle is called Giselle, said Centurion, and she's also Draconian. Draconian, surprised she. You mean, half human half dragon. Exactly, answered Centurion, but that's now all. According to Lele, Draconians has the power to summon the dragons. So, it's quite be possible that it was Hardy who's awakened that flame dragon to attack the gate. But what for? Asked Pudilov. Wasn't she's the one who opened it in the first place? Yes, said Centurion, but then she's allowed the imperial forces to proceed into the gate, and her apostle was detaining the apostle of Zumfut Mabel for long enough, till the forces of the empire has invaded Ginza. I get it, said Momotaro. Hardy has screwed up and decided to cover her tracks, huh? But I'll bet her plans are far more than just that. I think so too, Momo-kun, said Centurion, and if I'm right, we'll soon hear more about them. Also, the way things are going, the gods are not too pleased with Hardy's shenanigans, so it's just a matter of time before she'll have to answer for her deeds. And if that happened, said Pudilov, then perhaps the gods will summon Rory and you, Commander, to their meeting place, to tell you their real plans. Then finding about those plans is your top priority, Commander, said Marshall. You need to investigate this Giselle's plans and put a stop to it. Surely, she's planning another assault on Alnus. You need to detain her and put Hardy to choice. Either explain her actions to other gods or leave us in peace. That way, we may know what that Mabel's mission was, and what those gods are planning for us. Sounds good, said Pudilov. I'd second that decision. So will I, said she. I agree as well, said Momotaro. Thank you, gentlemen, said Centurion. I'll get on it as soon as we get back to Special Region. But in the meantime, I believe we need to show our guests how the world outside the gate really looks like. I agree with that, said Marshall. Tell you what, after tomorrow's trip around Tokyo, you'll take the guests to Yokota Air Base. One of my jets will be waiting there to take you on the trip to Beijing, Moscow, New York and Los Angeles. That way, you'll able to show our guests all about our world, despite it'll be only 4 countries. Good idea, said Pudilov, I'll prepare a suitable welcome for them in Moscow. So will I, said she, in Beijing. And I'll make sure that their stay in Tokyo will go smoothly, said Momotaro. Thank you, gentlemen, said Centurion, as for my part, I'll make sure that their trip and return to special region will be safe and sound. Then, I think, we're done now, said Marshall. I think, Lady Octavia and others has also finished their meeting with the princess as well. So, let's conclude this meeting, gentlemen. The weather was quite chilly that afternoon, as Vinkman and his senior staff stood together near the ramp leading onto the Mercy. They were all dressed in their navy whites and were joined by members of both the Air Force and Army medical personnel that were also deployed on board. In recent days, the amount of patients they had received from beyond the gate had dwindled quite a bit. Soon, a coach bus being escorted by shore patrol SUVs pulled up to the literal red carpet and came to a stop. A few moments went by before. Wait, is that an elf? And where did the cat girl and bunny girl come from? Sure enough, the Falmart contingent that had caused quite a stir at the United Nations had now arrived in Yokosuka with their chaperones. They were here to take a tour of the UNSC Mercy, as the US thought it would be a very good idea to show the Falmart natives just what kind of support the coalition forces had at their disposal in their war against Sidera. But what really caught Vinkman's attention was the fact that one of their guests was the princess of the very same empire they were at war with. By now, Princess Pina County Lotta was a well-known figure in this world, and the resulting memes about her name were quite amusing. Needless to say, he was quite tickled by the name of said princess, but once it was out of his system, the Navy captain was ready to greet the cocktail drink in her party. "Welcome on board the United States naval ship Mercy, Your Majesty," said Vinkman with a smile, as he and his staff welcomed the royals. Lele and Atami were there as well and acted as translators between the visiting Falmart natives, as Pina replied. "Thank you for allowing me and the Countess visit your vessel and tour it. I am very certain that our visit would prove to be very enlightening." Over the next couple hours, Princess Pina, Countess Mayui, and their companions were led through the massive hospital ship. Captain Vinkman giving them a brief history about his vessel and answering any and all questions the royals had. As he explained the capabilities of the Mercy to a very impressed, if not shaken, imperial princess. A hospital that can move anywhere in their world and treat anyone, need it be enemy or one of their own, Pina thought to herself, as she was taken aback by the number of beds the ship had on board. Centurion's people must have been willing to take losses if they thought it best to ask for such a vessel to be sent to their country. A cold shiver ran up and down the princess's spine, as members of the crew listed just what capabilities the Mercy had and just what kind of medical procedures they could do on home. The fact that the Empire now faced an enemy that could take care of its wounded slot better than the Empire could take care of their own. During the course of their visit, the royals and their party were amazed by what they saw. Mayui surprised everyone when she volunteered to have an X-ray taken of her arm, as well as having one of the on-board dentists examine her teeth during the tour. Meanwhile, Pina, Hamilton, Panache Lady Boses had near panic attacks when they were taken into one of the Mercy's operating theaters and shown some of the surgical instruments that were normally used. But what really made the two women uneasy was just how casual these other-worlder doctors were about what they did. Back in the Empire, healers were some of the more respected members of their society, as they were usually the only ones with the knowledge to deal with many of the usual health issues that existed in their world. Not surprisingly, healers were highly sought after by many of the noble houses for their personal use and were usually paid a very generous amount for their services. This unfortunately led to many well-known healers developing a bit of an inflated ego as a result, as the constant praise they received went to their heads, resulting in a mindset of superiority and even entitlement by these self-proclaimed medical workers. But while that may have been the case in Falmart, the other worker doctors did not come off as entitled or abrasive. As a matter of fact, these men and women were quite possibly more knowledgeable and capable than any healer back home, yet they did not boast about how many lives they had saved or even how much they had been paid to do so. Pina and her knights remained quiet as the tour continued, only asking questions every so often so as to appear they were still paying attention. But inwardly, they were just overwhelmed by just what they were being shown. To invest such time and energy to build and operate such a massive vessel was one thing, to discover that its only purpose was to treat the sick and or wounded. But like all good things, the tour came to an eventual end, and even though Vinkman offered to host them for dinner, the delegation politely declined the offer and disembarked just before to end the Mercy's royal visit. That evening, the members of the Third Recon were having dinner with Lady Octavia and ambassadors, while the presidents leave to their planes to their countries, and Momotaro went back to Tokyo to get back to his work. At dinner then, at the suggestion of Lucilla, Taylor, and Panache found themselves seated next to each other. This was to the approval of Lady Octavia and Princess Pina and the amusement of Rory, Atami, and Kuribayashi. Panache also noticed an amused twinkle in the eye of her dear friend Bozes. Of course, Panache also noticed the slightest blushing by Bozes as she took a seat next to Sergeant Tomita. "So, you would have Her Highness and everyone else distracted for a bit, my dear friend. Just understand that sooner or later, they will all realize there is nothing between Taylor and myself. I have no time for wistful fantasy while my heart pains over the fate of Tiberius. Besides, even were my heart not heavy with worry, I am sure that Taylor could not have interest in what my father calls such an unnatural girl, like me." Now ensconced in her traditional place at the head of the table, Lady Octavia waited for all of her guests to be seated before rising, goblet in hand. "Your Imperial Highness, Vice Minister Shirayuri, Ambassador Russell, lords and ladies, esteemed guests, it is my pleasure to see you all tonight. Before we commence feasting, there is an important matter of business we must address. After careful consultation with Lieutenant Colonel Mihara and Ambassador Russell, I feel it is an appropriate time to address an important matter. None of us here can deny that a great change looms for the Empire. This is not the first time our people have been confronted with change. I intend that my family and my house will continue and may yet even prosper in the face of the uncertainties that lie ahead of us. But that will require knowledge beyond my own and an understanding of the world with which the Empire has collided. This is why I have chosen an heir from the blood of this new world. By the laws and customs of our people, I name William James Taylor as my son and legal heir. That in the eyes of the Empire he is William James Taylor Octavius. That one day he will inherit the title and lands of my father. That I believe him an honorable man, I trust that he will act to protect our family and conduct himself honorably in all things. I would not ask that he betray the oaths or trusts of his people as only a person without honor would ask such, and only a person without honor would accept such, and those are traits unworthy of our house. My son, as suited to your station as heir of my house, it is time you carried the signet of our house." Antonius, the older of Octavia's two natural-born sons, rose from his seat and stepped to his mother with Marcus right behind him. Antonius handed his mother a small box which she opened and studied with satisfaction. "Come here, my son," Octavia told Taylor warmly. As Taylor rose from his seat, Kuribayashi gave a curious glance at Ambassador Russell. "Forgive me, but I thought it was against American law for its citizens to accept any titles or gifts from foreign governments." Russell smiled. "The exact wording in the Constitution is that, no title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them, shall, without the consent of the Congress, accept of any present, emolument, office, or title, of any kind whatever, from any king, prince, or foreign state. I think Congress will accept a recommendation to allow this. The potential for establishment of ties with a possible future ally and trading partner far outweighs any risk." There it was. From a military perspective, the United States did not consider the Empire to be any particular threat or challenge, but rather an opportunity to be cultivated before opposing powers managed to get a foot in the door. What was unspoken were that there would still be consequences to come. Pina listened very attentively to all this. Lady Octavia had made it clear she was acting in the interests of her house and family. If the Empire chose to take a path of self-destruction, her house would survive. Pina would pay heed to her wisdom as she wondered what would become of the Empire. What would become of those who would try to deny the truths that Lady Octavia and now Pina herself could see so plainly, and what would become of the rest of them? As Taylor stood in front of Lady Octavia, she showed him the jeweled ring which bore the emblem of her house. As she placed it on his finger, she addressed the room. "Here, before Her Imperial Highness, I affirm that as the bearer of this ring, You are the rightful heir to House Octavius. She added, I intended for you to have this before you left, but it took a little longer than I had hoped for the craftsman to complete. I am relieved that the delay did not cause you any serious trouble. Bozes shuffled a little nervously and Panache fought to suppress her own embarrassment that they had very nearly given extreme affront to one of the great houses of the empire. Nothing that we couldn't handle, Taylor answered mildly, to which she raised an eyebrow. Octavia smiled. My son, you have a talent for making the acquaintance of some of the most distinguished daughters in the entire empire. I trust that difficulties were minor. Completely. Lady Bozes and Lady Panache acted with all due restraint and chivalry. Bozes, Panache, and Princess Pina herself felt a measure of relief at this. Things were bad enough without borrowing even more trouble. Good. I look forward to discussing family matters later. Now, sit. Tonight's feast has been prepared in your honor, my son. The food was excellent. The conversation was generally lively as Princess Pina expressed considerable interest in Riza and her work. The subject also eliciting interest from Lady Bozes and amusement from Colonel Mihara. Ambassador Russell fielded numerous questions from Hamilton about the governments of Japan and the United States. It is a fascinating system, Hamilton declared finally, but democracy, on the national level would be an impractical government model in our world. It depends too much upon a learned population to function. On a small scale, it's fine. Villagers ought to know their village and understand its problems, but understanding the matters of the entire nation requires an educated and informed population with the time and inclination to contemplate such things. Ambassador Russell listened thoughtfully and nodded. What the young woman had said was correct in regards to an educated and informed population. Americans often referred to having 3 branches of government, each designed to keep the others in check, but in reality, there were 4 legs upon which American democracy stood. The responsibility of that 4th branch often overlooked and ignored at peril. It is not a perfect system and it requires a lot of effort, but my people would never want to live any other way. This was one reason why Russell fervently hoped that talks between the Pacific powers and the empire proved fruitful. He did not want to see yet another in history's long list of ham-fisted attempts at nation building. Democracy had to be built and nurtured from within a society, and while it was the system he believed in, he suspected it would take a minimum of several decades at least to foster the changes required for an American-style government to work in the lands now ruled by the empire. In the meantime, Lucilla eagerly questioned Princess Pina and Bozes and Panache about the Rose Order. You would wish to join the order? Pina asked Lucilla with a touch of disbelief. After all, had not their current circumstances demonstrated that the entire imperial way of war was now completely obsolete? Absolutely. Once we return home, and if mother and father permit it, I should certainly ask your highness to consider my appointment. Then if that is your wish, I will do so. Thank you, your highness. Octavia chuckled. Lucilla has admired the order ever since my husband and I took her to see your knights in tournament 2 years ago. It was most impressive. Thank you, Pina answered with a touch of pride returning. As dinner progressed, Panache began to feel somewhat more at ease, enough to finally inquire on the matter dearest to her thoughts. Lt. Colonel Mihara, I was wondering, I have not had a chance to look over the lists you provided us, but my younger brother was given a commission in our expeditionary army. I was hoping if he might be held prisoner. I know the vice minister said that your people did not practice ransoming prisoners, but if at least I knew he was alive and could send a message to him. By your leave, Lieutenant. Colonel, Taylor suggested. I'll look into it. Certainly, Lieutenant. Thank you, ma'am. After you've seen to that, if you and Lady Panache would join us in the sitting room, Octavia invited. Of course. After dinner, it only took a few moments to locate the name of Tiberius Calgi in the prisoner database. You said this was your younger brother? Taylor asked Panache as he brought up her brother's file and picture. This boy looked too young to be sitting in the middle of a prison camp. Panache smiled, feeling relief that at least Tiberius was alive and apparently safe. He's 15. Your army normally grant commissions to 15-year-olds. 16 is the normal age, Panache explained, but our father traded some favors to get him an early commission. Father didn't want Tiberius to miss on the opportunity for glory. Her tone spoke volumes about how she felt about that. I take it you didn't think that was such a good idea. Tiberius would do anything to please our father, but he's a poet. A thinker. Let him learn and build. So, first commission, what would they have him doing? Asked Taylor. Most probably serving as a messenger. Panache replied. It's a good first assignment to acclimate a new officer to the army. I see. Well, it is normal practice to allow prisoners to send and receive letters and receive packages. That won't be a problem. Thank you. She felt a weight had been lifted from her heart. Our mother will be very much relieved. It was my pleasure. After a not unpleasant walk, Taylor and Panache reported to Lady Octavia's sitting room. Ambassador Russell and Vice Minister Shirayuri had both taken their leave by this point, but Octavia's other guests along with Lieutenant Colonel Mihara, several of the ranking Satyran ladies, Octavia's natural children, along with the faithful Felicia and 2 Marine guards were present. I sense there is good news to report, my lady, Octavia asked Panache solicitously, noting the eased demeanor of the young woman. Yes, milady. My brother is alive and safe, Panache reported. That is excellent news indeed, Princess Pina agreed. Now with that happy bit of news, Octavia continued. There is one last matter, my son. Thanks to Chief Richardson, I was able to commission a swordsmith capable of forging a sword worthy of our house name. Lucilla. Her daughter retrieved a long case and with a proud smile, set it on the table in front of her brother and opened it. I am told it is forged from something called L6 steel, Octavia stated. The workmanship does appear excellent. She looked over at Lieutenant Colonel Mihara. Lieutenant Colonel, as this room is quite secure and guarded, would it be all right to allow Her Highness and her companions to examine this? Lieutenant Governor. Colonel Mihara nodded her assent to the Marine sentries. I guess it would take a swordsman to truly appreciate a sword. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. I may love Lieutenant Taylor as any mother would a son, but he is simply not yet versed in the ways of the sword. I will need to find a suitable teacher for him. She turned to Pina's party. Ladies. As we've said, it takes an expert to recognize a quality blade. Early that evening, Tiberius, son of Baron Kalji, was told to gather his kit and report to Colonel Master's office. The grim-faced sergeant giving no hint as to why. Tiberius's hutmates were certain that the boy had violated some taboo or had otherwise offended. The dread lady, as Masters was called, in whispered murmurs. Sergeant Jardelli calmly escorted the team to the camp commander's office. Thank you, Sergeant. Wait outside, the colonel instructed. Yes, ma'am. Alone before the inscrutable gaze of the dread lady, Tiberius stood absolutely still as she studied him wordlessly for what seemed like an eternity. When the impossible happened, the dread lady smiled. Tiberius L. Kalji, after a careful review of new information, it seems we have made a mistake. We had originally classified you as a combatant, but according to new information, that appears to have been an error. In a minute, Sergeant Jardelli will take you to our mess for dinner, and then you will wait for transportation to Camp Augustus. Congratulations, you're on your way back to the world. Tiberius, Panache exclaimed in surprise and pure elation as she saw her brother walk into the room, escorted by Lady Lucilla. Panache, the young teen's face lit in joy and astonishment before also recognizing the imperial princess. Tiberius knelt before them. Forgive me, Your Highness. There is nothing to forgive, Pina replied mildly. It speaks well of the bond between the two of you. Stand and join us. I am sure you have many tales to tell us of your experiences in this new world. Ah, yes, Your Highness. His face flushed crimson as he warred within himself, trying to present himself with control and dignity as he stood before his princess. It had been safe to admire her and her beauty from a respectable distance, but personally face to face with her and in front of his sister and several of the empire's most renowned ladies, Tiberius had a sinking feeling he was only managing to look like a fool. It was Lady Lucilla who came to his rescue. Forgive me, Your Highness and noble ladies, I believe that my lord is still much fatigued from his journey. She touched his elbow. Come, you should take some refreshment, Lucilla told Tiberius, guiding him over to a long table set with drink and herbs. If Her Highness and ladies would follow me. Pina barely suppressed a smirk at this as the young man was led away. Panache was less successful and thanked the gods that her brother's attention was now fully centered on the raven-haired young lady holding his arm. Well, father, it would seem Tiberius is managing quite well without your help. He's been found by a smart girl who looks like she knows a prize when she sees it. Chapter 21, Tokyo Ambush and Heavens. Riza greeted the morning with a fair amount of satisfaction. She had escaped the cold, dark confines of her apartment and the empty refrigerator inside, and Yoji had promised that the heat, light, and water would be back on by this evening. She had scored a very satisfying meal. And didn't everything seem better on a full stomach? And this morning's prospects looked bright as well. Breakfast was an excellent notion, and with Yoji's stipend payments in hand, it was a good idea to go shopping. Luckily, Atami had suggested it would be a good idea to take their off-world visitors to see the stores and markets in Tokyo. Riza had some suggestions on exactly where to go, of course. The other satisfactory result of last night was the wealth of stories and gossip she had heard. It was perfect fodder for inspiration. Before heading off to breakfast, she opened a new document on her laptop and typed, Shiroi Satin wo Kiru Kishin Tachi, or translated, Nights in White Satin. At this same early hour, Princess Pina and her knight companions were sitting down to a meeting with Lady Octavia and a few other notable Satyran ladies, Lady Agrippina among them. Under the mentoring of Lady Octavia, Agrippina's anger had been honed to a sharp edge, the woman being given a focus and clarity she had previously lacked after having been abandoned by her so recent spouse. The casual observer might mistake the single red rose set on the table to be decorative in nature, perhaps symbolic of Pina's knightly order, but it was a sign. This meeting was to be held in strictest confidence, sub rosa, meaning, beneath the rose. To ensure that they were secure from eavesdroppers, at least human ones, Octavia had Felicia and one of her battle sisters standing guard, ears alert for the slightest sound of intrusion or disturbance. "You need not worry, Your Highness," Octavia assured her. "Their clan are the most loyal retainers of my house." "Of course, my lady," Pina replied calmly, "and I appreciate you and your ladies meeting with me so early. I do not know how long I will be staying here in Japan, but before I return to the Empire I require the benefit of your wise counsel. It is no exaggeration to say the Empire faces the greatest danger in its history. I came here to find an avenue for securing peace before we are completely destroyed." Pina paused. "At the same time, I cannot sanction a peace which results in our annihilation by surrender and quiescence. I ask you to guide me." Octavia nodded. "Very well, Your Highness. Then I will be succinct as I say that your presence is a fortunate circumstance, as with all respect, no other member of the imperial line enjoys your advantages of clear perspective and apolitical standing." She continued, "Your father will have a hard time ending this war, having presided over its inception. The war faction in the Senate is strong, and for the Emperor to seek peace without some tangible victory, some material gain for the Empire, he would lose face before the Senate. It will be necessary to sway at least some of the senators of the war faction first," Pina concluded. "Many sons of senators and prominent nobles may be held here. Their release might persuade their kinsmen to adopt a more favorable attitude." "Perhaps," Octavia replied, "though many of them may well be too stung in their pride to appreciate their good fortune." "Still, we can hope," she agreed. "On the other hand, I must believe that your brother, Prince Zorzel, will strongly oppose any peace talks. It is known that the prince has cultivated friends among the merchant guilds and many of the Senate's war faction. As the presumptive heir to the throne, he has been hard at work establishing his own power base, and the core of his influence is built upon the continued aggressive expansion of the empire and the acquisition of easy riches. I will need to keep a low profile around him then," Pina agreed. "And then there's Prince Diabo." Many noted Panasha's jaw set hard at the mention of the younger prince's name. Lady Octavia seemed not to notice as she continued. "While Prince Diablo is certainly capable of reasoning the war is unwinnable, he is perhaps too clever for his own good. He is born to conspiracy. If he tries to manipulate the powers of this world, we may find they do not play the game the same way." Pina sighed. She could not deny Octavia's appraisal of the situation. Her father had taught one of her brothers to seize power and the other to manipulate it. One lacked the subtlety of their father while the other lacked the directness needed to command authority. He had divided them well, and neither of them could gain the imperial throne without his support and blessing. As for Pina, he had mostly left her to her own devices, as she was not seen as a serious candidate to ascend to the throne. Perhaps it was for the best that her lessons had been learned away from the attention of their father, whom she loved but could not at this point confide in. But as daunting as her task seemed, what worried Pina the most was just exactly what price Japan and her allies would demand to secure peace. She trusted Centurion and his men. She believed that General Hazama and Minister Shirayuri and Ambassador Russell were all honorable people, but there were men like Hazama's aide who had a predatory look in his eyes. What would they take in exchange for peace? As if sensing Pina's thoughts, Octavia turned to the other side of the equation. As to the intentions and goals of the Japanese and Americans and their allies, it is certainly difficult to read the intentions of people whose ways are so different from our own. I will note this is why it was important for me to find an heir from among them. He will better understand many dangers we cannot conceive. It is my sincerest hope that in bringing him into my house, he will be vested in protecting it. She smiled. However, it is still possible to consider their aims in the broader sense ourselves. If their design was simple conquest, which we cannot deny is well within their ability, then they would have no need to conduct any negotiations at all. In the scenario of a direct invasion, delay favors us and not them. It is safe to conclude that conquest is not their intended aim. I must carefully add that they still can do so at any time they choose if negotiations fail to produce acceptable results for them. Pina looked to Bozes, Panache, and Hamilton, each of them carefully nodding in consideration of this. The logic was unassailable. They could still desire concessions of territory, Hamilton noted. Indeed. Though from what I have seen, their agriculture must be vastly superior to ours for them to be able to support cities like this one. They clearly have no need of our croplands. Now, of course, they might desire more room to spread out and expand. But from what you describe happened at Italica, it at least sounds as if they do not currently desire our territory, beyond securing control of the gate. The gate is the key after all, Pina agreed. With it in their hands, they control the board. I see no outcome where they do not insist on holding sacred Alnus and the ground immediately surrounding it. Even if they make no other claims, this will be bitter medicine for many, but it is inevitable. True, Octavia agreed. And I see no way to make the medicine go down any easier. Pina pondered this. It would be preferable if this unpalatable matter could be allowed to quietly pass without comment as a fait accompli. But this was an unrealistic hope and everyone knew it. It might be best to state matters openly, better than the opposition bringing it up at the wrong moment. She put this matter aside to ponder later as Hamilton suggested another disturbing possibility. A city so large must take a great deal of labor to build. What if they intend to use the empire as a source of slave labor? Lady Octavia shook her head. No, Lady Hamilton. That won't happen. In fact, the cultures here view slavery as vile and uncivilized. The mere presence of slavery in the empire will be offensive to them. More serious is that some of their citizens were sent back to the empire as slaves in the first hours of our incursion into their territory. They will be absolutely furious where it comes to their own people being enslaved. We will have to discreetly inquire as to their whereabouts, Pina replied. We need to prove at least a good faith effort to return their people. That would wise, Your Highness, Octavia agreed. Yes. Unfortunately, we still don't know what they might want, what we can bargain with, Hamilton commented. They asked for a reparations payment of more gold than has been mined in the entire history of the empire, and when we told them that, they seemed unconcerned. Almost as if they already have something else in mind. Perhaps I can answer that, hearded another voice, and entered Centurion. I've hearded what you're talking about, ladies, so I thought I would join your conversation in order to make clear what exactly my superiors want from you. Yes, that'll be quite appreciated, Sir Prime, smiled Octavia. Please, come in, have a seat. Thank you, said Centurion, seating at one of the chairs. Now then, the first order of business is to clarify what we actually want from the empire. I can assure you that we don't need no slaves or your food or your people. Such vulgar tactics for us is something too disgusting to even explain. However, what we really want is to prevent another Ginza incident. You mean, another empire invasion? Asked Pina. Indeed, nodded Centurion. I know that right now, the imperial forces are too weak to mount another assault, but sooner or later they'll be back in full strength. And who's to say that if Molt or someone else attempts another assault on Tokyo, or Moscow, or Beijing, considering the possibility that gate could actually be opened almost anywhere, I'd say that's absolutely imminent for our world. I do not intend to repeat another Ginza, and so are my superiors. We want to put an end to such idea, even before it gain birth. I see, said Octavia, so, what are you intend to do, Sir Prime? Well, it's quite possible, that my superiors would demand to declare Alnus as a territory belong to the United Nations, said Centurion. That way, we'll be able to secure the gate and any possibility of the Empire to make another attempt of invading our world. Also, they would propose a trading agreement, that will allow certain products of our world go to Falmart. Like what? Asked Hamilton. Like, for example, fertilizer to stimulate and improve the crops, answered Centurion. You should know, that our agriculture is practically way advanced over the Empire, considering the numerous inventions our scientists did to improve the lands and the growth. I'm sure, that many peasants would agree, if we provide them the fertilizer, this will stimulate the agriculture in Falmart as well. Impressive, said Octavia, so you mean, that with such products, you can practically help our people? Yes, said Centurion, but that will also might put the landowners in danger, said Octavia, considering, that the products will go to peasants, not the landowners. The landowners must understand, that what UN does for Falmart, is for the best for all people, not just rich, answered Centurion. If they'll be trying to speculate on this market by claiming the fertilizer and then selling by higher prices, as well attempting to burn the crops and the farms, they shall be classified as criminals and face the consequences from both Empire and UN. We prefer to implement the basic rules of our laws. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and everyone is equal before the law. So that way both landowners and the peasants will be facing trial as equals, not as when one would be able to win the law, while the other gets all the blame. We've already seen, what does that injustice has done to our nations, and we do not want to be repeated in Falmart. What about the slaves? Asked Hamilton, aren't you gonna want them to be released as well? Yes, said Centurion, because that is one reason we now fighting the Empire. You see, your Empire was been waging his wars for two reasons. To get rich by plundering other lands and to get more slaves to do the hard working. In our view, he's nothing more than a common bandit, who robs and kills only for his own satisfaction. Not only that, he's also enslaved several children, especially women, so they could entertain the nobles. Such vile practice is absolutely unacceptable by our world. That is why our goal is to free all slaves, so that they would be live as normal sentient beings, not as some tools and toys. But that would never be accepted by our society, said Boses. Our cities were practically built by slaves, just like yours. Centurion, hearing this, burst into laughter, which made the blonde knight uncomfortable. She realized that she just said something really stupid. My dear Lady Boses, said Centurion, after he calmed down from laughing, do you actually believe that the city like Tokyo was been built by slaves? Wrong, milady. This city was been built by its citizens, not by forced labor. Do you saw those towers in Ginza? How would it takes for slave to climb that height without falling down? It'll be a suicide. No, my dear, those towers were been built by people of Tokyo, not slaves. What about the mines? Asked Panache. Surely you wouldn't send your people to work in such horrible conditions. Oh, but you're wrong again, Lady Panache, answered Centurion. We have miners, people, who work in those mines, who work in several conditions but also been protected by others. Protected? Surprised Panache. Exactly, said Centurion. When the mine perhaps experience a cave-in, immediately a rescue operation is arranged to save the miners. And that goes for other workers as well. Not only they've been cared by our doctors, they've also been treated as equals. Equals? Surprised Hamilton. Exactly, said Centurion, because this is what it's all about. Equality. That's how the democracy works even in other monarchical countries in our world, like Sweden, Belgium, Britain, Norway. In those countries, all people are equal despite who they are, noble or poorman, worker or senator, sailor or royalty, each of them have their own rights and privileges, given to them by the law. In other words, what you need to do, is to apply same laws in the empire. You don't need slaves to do the hard working. Just train some miners and workers, so that they can build your cities by free workmanship, not by the whip. That's gonna takes a lot of changes, Sir Prime, said Pina. I know, said Centurion, but if you do nothing, you will get nothing. As I said, Molt's current policy of wars has already brought the empire to the state she is now, so it's just a matter of time before the whole imperial system will crumble. Changes are necessary, otherwise the empire is practically doomed. You speak wisely, Sir Prime, said Octavia, then she sighs, unfortunately, you understand, that Molt's sons might not accept your ways. I've already talked about that with my superiors, said Centurion, and we agreed, that perhaps we can make Diabo el Caesar into our ally. What? Surprised Pina, how? We've been convinced, that Diabo is a conspirator, said Centurion, but we also know, that he's a level-headed man with a reasonable thoughts. Perhaps if we offer him a place in the new government, he would gladly jump into the opportunity to have the power he desired. That might work after all, nodded Octavia, and what about Zorzel? Well, he's a problem, sighed Centurion, he's a man of arrogance and treachery, almost same as his father. He's also a sex-crazed maniac and a sadist, who loves to torture his victims to death. With his influence and power with guilds, military and pro-war senators, he would not only support this war, but also do anything to continue it, even by going against his own father. You mean, Zorzel will might kill my father, gasped Pina, the other knights and Lady Octavia was also in shock. I'm afraid, that's the logical solution, answered Centurion, you see, with the current situation, Molt's days are practically numbered. But a man like him would never leave the power he once had, so instead, he would put Zorzel on the throne, with him behind Zorzel's back, thus maintaining power in the empire once more. But Zorzel isn't the kind of a man, who would allow someone control him, so logically, he would remove his father, thus reigning supreme in the empire. That is quite horrible scenario you propose, Sir Prime, said Octavia, so, how does your superiors have decided to prevent such tragedy? We intend to prevent nothing, answered Centurion, whatever squabble Zorzel and Molt have between them, it's none of our concern, we do not get involved in domestic squabbles for power. However, we will support anyone in the empire, who strive for peace, so we will help those people by forming a new government they would choose, thus opposing Zorzel's government. A new government? Asked Hamilton, from who? From the members of the peace-loving senators, of course, answered Centurion. And who would lead this new government? Asked Panache, would that be Diabo? No, he's too thinker for this job, answered Centurion, we've decided, that the best candidate would be another member of the royal family. Pina, hearing this, gasped, realizing, that Centurion means me, she gasped, smiling nervously, Sir Prime, surely you jest. There's no way I would lead a new government. I'm not experienced to do so. Boulderdash, snorted Centurion, you've got everything the leader need, Pina. In fact, you've already laid the groundwork for your succession. There's no other one, who can do it. But I'm not just like your superiors, Sir Prime, protested Pina, I'm just a third princess, ranked 10th to the throne. There's no way my father would appoint me as his heir. I believe, that's for your father to decide, said Centurion, as for my superiors, they've didn't born presidents, they've become that way. For example, President Pudilov started his career as the intelligence officer, working in another country. Then he became the mayor's assistant in his home city, then started work in the presidential administration. After that, he worked as the chief of the Council of National Security, the director of FSB, the Russian Security Service, then as vice president, and finally, the presidental's temporary replacement. That was his career before the elections, when he became the president. Then there's our President Marshall. He started his career as a soldier and a pilot, but then he became a lawyer, a judge, a governor, a senator, and finally the President of the United States. Let's not forget the Japanese Prime Minister Tsurugi. Do you know why he always so friendly with me? Because I once helped him during his education in Otokojuku School, where he passed through sheer hell. After he graduated from school, I've helped him to go to America, where he became a student in Harvard, our best university, which, by the way, President Marshall also attended. After Momotaro returned to Japan, he won successfully the elections and became this country's prime minister. In other words, Pina, leaders does not born, they've built themselves. You've already made several steps for it. Now, you must go make another. After all, you want peace with our world, isn't it? Yes, nodded Pina, I am. Then use your powers as a princess and a leader to form the government you need to face your own brother, said Centurion, you've already have diplomatic skills and oratory, not to mention your capability as a warrior. Now, you must use them to save your own empire from both Mold and Zorzel, who will destroy it in the process of their craving for war. Pina then looked onto the ground and think about Centurion's words. He's right, she did wanted peace with the other worlders, but running the government. That was enough to make her head hurt. Perhaps, she could ask Diabo to help her in this matter. After all, Centurion did mention that he might be the ally they need against her father and Zorzel. Finally, she looked at Centurion. I need some time to think about it, she said. Perhaps today's tour of the city and around your world will give us some clues. Agreed, Your Highness, said Centurion, there's no need to rush. After all, we can solve our problems during our trip. Let's go. A very short time later, with Chief Richardson driving, a bus with heavy tinted windows cleared the main gate. Richardson glanced back at his passengers with a grin as he keyed his radio. Tourist wagon to Sentinels. We are on the move. On your cue. A slightly accented voice answered him. Acknowledged tourist wagon. Commencing. Hospitality. Let's get you on the highway. Roger that. As the bus lumbered onto the main road, two sets of vehicles began following it, each in a rolling relay. Hamilton cringed as their bus hit a pothole. There is at least one thing that the Empire can claim, Your Highness. Imperial roads are certainly much better maintained, she noted dryly. Asphalt, Taylor told them. It's cheaper than concrete, quick to set but not nearly as durable. He smiled ruefully. Even our concrete probably isn't as good as yours, since I'm betting you probably still use the old Roman recipe. Our concrete will last about 50 years. There are still sections of Roman roads still usable after 2000. Still, we do have a few tricks up our sleeves. No doubt, Panache replied mildly. With this event being put on with far less preparation time than anyone would have liked, the operation was, of necessity, rather free-form in nature. Ideally, the Foreign Ministry, in conjunction with public security, would have carefully planned out an itinerary. Security forces would have been deployed in advance, but in this case, there had been literally no time to plan, and whether the Foreign Ministry and the American State Department liked it or not, Lieutenants Atami and Taylor had by far the best rapport and understanding of their off-world guests. It was necessary to rely on these men to follow a set of hastily composed guidelines and to use discretion and provide a heads-up to public security. Of course, this did mean that there were fewer parties who knew the planned movements of their guests. This was well as there were dangerous leaks of information which had still not been fully tracked. The party followed a route passing the site of the new Tokyo World Trade Center South Tower, where their visitors could witness modern construction methods at work. Even for Lele, Rory, and Tuka, who had witnessed at least a sample of modern building techniques in the building of Camp Alnus, it was impressive. For Princess Pina and her party, it was nothing short of astonishing. Even the greatest towers in Sedera are nothing next to this, Pina breathed. Sitting next to her, Boses nodded in shock. Were their group smaller, perhaps, Atami might have considered splitting up, but under the circumstances, it was best for everyone to stay in one location. Their first stop was the Junkudo Ikebukuro bookstore. It was here that Riza helped Pina and Boses discover walls filled with manga. It was as Riza began to discuss the yaoi titles that were her bread and butter that Pina noted an interesting phenomenon. I wonder if Atami or Taylor will react the same way. Perhaps I could ask Sergeant Kuribayashi. Or maybe I should simply experiment for myself. Looking around, she spotted her target. Ah, Atami. In the meantime, with assistance from Shino, Lele quickly found the science section. Books on astronomy, physics, and chemistry were eagerly seized by the young mage. Rory was fascinated by books on the various mythologies of this world, while Tuka found books on zoology, as well as collections of poetry and songs and even cooking. At the same time, Taylor, Panache, and Hamilton were on the floor where books printed in English were. Taylor looking for books on government and history, especially histories covering Rome and on England in the 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries. All told, the group purchased some 70 books of various types, and not including Pina, making a virtual clean sweep of the yaoi manga. Fortunately, the Japanese government was picking up the tab for everything but some personal purchases by Centurion. The cashier had an understandably pleased expression as she rang up the group's purchases. After a tour of the Tsukiji market, a break for lunch was in order. Of course, this was also an opportunity to demonstrate the full scope of Japan's capital with a visit to Skytree Tower, dining with a full panoramic view of the city below stretching to the horizon. Even Rory was struck by the view before she grinned. Hardy would never dare to come here, so near the heavens. Pina nodded. They truly are giants, she breathed. They can raise us up or crush us underfoot. Briefly, she imagined such a tower rising above Sedera. The wealth and prosperity she saw here she wanted for her people, but her people could not simply take it. They would have to earn this. The Musashi? Taylor asked, looking around the restaurant and the very expensive-looking fittings. How did you manage to get a group this size into the Musashi with no reservation? Atami looked a little embarrassed. I know someone who has that kind of pull. Well, I'm impressed. Glad you're learning to use your powers for good. Of course, Shino took it upon herself to organize the seating with a little input from Boses. This left Atami sitting between Rory and Tuka with Lele directly facing him and Riza and Shino in a good position to watch his discomfort while Pina sat with Boses on her left and Hamilton across from her and Panache next to Hamilton. Shino smirked as Taylor pulled out Lady Panache's seat before taking his own beside her, an act matched by Tomita as he, coincidentally, found himself next to Boses. If the ramen shop Atami had taken them to the previous day had been a sampling of common but hearty food, the Musashi was an experience in high-end Japanese-French fusion cuisine, an Epicurean experience unmatched even in Emperor Molt's palace. Light conversation accompanied the food and the stunning view. Afterward came fashion shopping. Unlike the hurried shopping to prepare Tuka for her testimony before the diet, this was a broader cultural sampling with Riza and Kuribayashi as primary guides for their guests and Atami, Tomita, and Taylor a captive audience. At one point, even Kuribayashi finding herself slightly embarrassed if very smugly pleased as Panache quietly took her aside to ask for help with intimate fashion. The results of their consultation were not readily revealed, though some purchases had apparently been made, Panache still being rather puzzled by what she saw but trusting Shino's judgment in the matter. Next, the group headed for Akihabara. Among the purchases, Lele and Hamilton each found heavy-duty laptops with solar charging cells. Lele, fascinated with having a world of knowledge literally at her fingertips, and Hamilton seeing the potential for organizing and storing data in a small and secure place. Party's over, guys, suddenly said Centurion, appearing with Scott, we better roll. What's going on, sir? Asked Atami, as he with others approached Centurion. I've just got words that the decoy bus was been ambushed near Tokyo Tower, answered Centurion, which means that Shadaloo or someone else has made their move to ambush the VIPs. Hearing such words, Pina's knights surrounded their princess, forming the protective circle, as well Persia and Mamina, who standed beside their countess, protecting her. Tuka and Lele grabbed their new bow and staff respectively, while Rory held her halberd still wrapped up, but ready for fight. Williams, Puller, Eric, Min, Haruka, Michiru, Setsuna, Shino, Kurata and Tomita also grabbed their handguns, scanning for possible threats. How many casualties? Asked Taylor. Few our guys got dinged up, but fine, answered Centurion. As for the attackers, they've suffered 12% casualty dead, 5 got captured. So, what now? Asked Atami. We need to get to Yokota Air Base, answered Centurion. I've arranged the emergency escape plan at Ginza. Chief Richardson is on his way there with the escort. We need to get there by train. Train? Asked Taylor, but sir, that's dangerous. What if they would try to ambush us underground? That's the risk we have to take, answered Centurion. Besides, I don't think they'll be crazy enough to attack us in public train. Let's roll. Soon, they were all underground at the Shinbuku station. By looking of things, Falmartians didn't like underground, as Boses, Pina, Panache, Hamilton, Mayui and Rory were looking nervous. What's with you, guys? Asked Centurion. It's because they don't like underground, answered Lele. This is where Hardy territory lies. I'm not worried about Hardy, answered Centurion. It's our friends from Cobra and Shadaloo we need to worry about. Soon, the train arrived. Centurion and other soldiers got inside the train easy, but Pina and others were practically dragged inside. As they got into the train, Rory clung to Centurion's arm. Still afraid of Hardy? Asked Centurion. I hate underground, whined Rory. Don't worry, we just need to pass few stations, said Centurion, then we'll be back on top. Bozes were also holding Tomita's hand, same as Panache, who holds Taylor's hand, while Mayui holding Pikachu close to her. Pikachu licked Countess's face to assure her. It's alright, Mayui-chan, he said. Puller was helping Mamina, while Kurata was holding Persia's hand, and it feel like heaven for him. Pina was holding Scott's hand, while Haruka was comforting Hamilton. At Kasumigaseki, entered Komikado. Mind if I join you? He asked. Please, if you will, answered Centurion. As the train continued, Centurion asked Komikado. So, any further attempts? Only at the hotel, where you're supposed to be staying. We found 2 vans loaded with guns. It's quite possible that they know about our safe house in Hakone. Well, fortunately for us, we're not going to Hakone. I've figured that they might figure out that Senkei Hotel is our safe house, so instead, we're going to Yokota Airbase. Yokota. But you know that they'll be here waiting for you to return, so that you may pass through the gate. Which is why I've arranged a trap in Hakone, said Centurion, then handed to Komikado his cell phone. Details are in description. I've sent a copy to the Defense Ministry directly to Kano-san, he knows what to do. I see, said Komikado, returning to Centurion his cell phone, you're planning to ambush them when they try to ambush you. Real smart, Centurion-san. Good. Now get ready, we're about to arrive in Ginza. We go by the exit to the main street, while you go other way and proceed to your agency. You'll get the rest of the detail from Sam Fisher. Understood. Good luck, Centurion-san. As the train arrived at Ginza, Centurion and others exited. As they got up the escalator, they've suddenly heard it, that Marunouchi line was been temporarily out of service due to wiring problems between Ginza and Tokyo. Smart, real smart, said Centurion, they must have figured out about the train, so they've set up an accident so it would stuck in the tunnel. Clever, but not clever enough. As they stayed outside, waiting for Chief Richardson's bus, a man in hoodie suddenly run to them, but Haruka swinged her fist, slamming the hood onto the ground. Don't even think about it, Picaro, she growled, cracking her fists and standing before fallen man. Well, let's see, who we got, said Centurion, turn him over. Williams and Puller turned the man, and Centurion gasped to see who it was. Jamil Kell, he barked, what are you doing here, you scum? The man get up, revealing to be Arabian. I'm here to punish that pagan, he growled, pointing at Rory. She dares desecrate the Allah by saying that there's another God. There's no God, except Allah. Oh, so that's it, said Centurion, just because Rory said that she's an apostle of Emroy, your bosses at Islamic Empire got nuts and sended you here. Well, you've picked the wrong target, Kel. You should know that your Islamic rules does not work in Falmart. I don't care, shouted Kel, you've may got me, but my brothers are also here. They will get their hands on that pagan witch and tear her heart away from her chest. Mark my words, you dog, this is far from over. It's over for you, pal, snorted Haruka, then she walked to Kel and punched him out. It was the Richardson arrived with the bus and escort. 2 of the men from one car took Kel with them, while the rest of the group got into the bus and drove away. As they drove to Yokota, Pina asked the question that everyone wanted to be answered. Why? We come under a flag of peace to make peace. Who would want to attack us? Taylor considered carefully. As I see it, there are 3 groups of people out there who would want something to happen. The first is the group Centurion already named it, the Shadaloo. They've the one who ambushed the decoy bus. The second group was Cobra Empire, who tried to attack us underground by jacking the train. And last but not least, is the Islamic Empire, particularly Jamil Kell, who was watching us. It's quite possible that they've the ones who staged that attack on hotel. Logical, nodded Centurion, quite logical. Pina nodded. Why though? If not revenge, then what? To capture our VIPs, said Centurion, after Tuka, Lele, and Rory's testimony before the Diet, they've become celebrities in the popular press. Obviously, both Bison and Von Strucker got interested with them, considering their unnatural capability, especially Rory as a demi-goddess. I'll bet Bison's after Rory, because he wants to learn her secret of immortality. Then there's you, Princess Pina. your lands in Falmart have special resources that might prove vital for the Cobra Empire to become powerful enough for starting their world conquest. I don't like the sound of that, Pena replied. Neither do we, Princess, Bozes replied, Panache and Hamilton nodding in agreement. Whoever has made a target and pawn of you have made an enemy this day. The order has a long memory and we will not forget either a friend or an enemy. Panache growled. Let them pray to whatever gods they hold that we never find them. Our steel will be drawn upon their flesh. Rory nodded with a cold smile. A blood oath is given then. Sounds like our guests does not like, when someone threatened them, smiled Michiru. As a matter of fact, said Scott, I'd say, Von Strucker and Bison has bitten off more they can chew. Soon they've reached Yokota Airbase. Ferguson and team, Hunter, were waiting for them. Welcome to Yokota, sir. Have a nice trip, asked Ferguson. Centurion looked at the group of mostly female Marines standing around next to their rather dented bus. A lot more peaceful than yours, Captain. He pointed at the sizable dent on the vehicle's starboard side. What happened? They hit us with a cement truck, ramming our bus, forcing into a concrete barrier. Then they tried storming the bus. Shit. Being tased sucks, sir. Don't misunderstand me, great to have Kevlar armor, but it doesn't cover everything and they tased me right under the armpit. Ouch. And then all hell breaks loose as this big guy, must have been 6'8" and built like a brick house. He tried reaching for our resident priestess of death. He nodded at Corporal Nakamura, who smirked with satisfaction, and she kicked him in the throat. Broke the hyoid, and then the guy behind him got a 9mm lobotomy. They probably thought that securing the bus was going to be the easy part. Rory gave a considering look to Nakamura. Oh. Nakamura. Front and center, Ferguson called out. Corporal Nakamura, called Buns by her squad mates, stepped forward still wearing Rory's spare outfit. She saluted Lieutenant Taylor and then turned to Rory. To the casual observer, Rory and Nakamura were virtually indistinguishable. Sorry for the blood stains on your outfit, Your Eminence. I'll make sure to clean it before I return it. Rory smiled. No need to concern yourself. Emroy is pleased with your work this day. It truly was a shame she could not claim her own apostles yet. Both this girl and Kuribayashi would have been excellent candidates, Rory thought. You may keep it as a token of Emroy's favor. Nakamura bowed and threw a wicked grin at Chief Richardson, who had been teasing her lightly before they left. Great, she's now literally the herald of death. Just what this base needs, another Marine with a swelled head, Richardson thought sourly. Anyway, sir, public security took the survivors into custody. Locke, Ferguson called to the tall blonde woman who had been Tuka's decoy. Unlike most of Ferguson's group, Locke wasn't a Marine. The yeoman had been chosen simply because there was no one else closer to Tuka's complexion and build. Still, she had comported herself well and the captain would have no problem filling out the paperwork to make sure that his kids all received proper credit and recognition for their performance. Yes, Captain. Go find Captain Lang and see if he knows anything more about our guests. Yes, Captain. Locke double-timed it into the main building. Ferguson then turned to Centurion. Well, that's about wrap it up, sir, he said, but it's quite possible that there's more of these guys. Don't worry, I've already worked on the plan, said Centurion. General Keating will provide the details. You need to be ready when we return. Yes, sir, saluted Ferguson. After that, the convoy went to Yokota Air Base and were soon joined by a pair of USAF military police Ford Explorers, who then proceeded to lead the Japanese vehicles to the airfield where the Japanese were greeted by a sight they were not expecting. Air Force One, Tomita gasped out, as he and the other Japanese soldiers saw the massive twin-engines airliner parked on the tarmac. The Americans sent us Air Force One. Yup, said Centurion. James sure kept his words. All right. Looks like we'll be flying to Beijing, Moscow and USA in style. Holy shit, muttered shocked Williams. They send the president's jet. What is Air Force One? Lele asked curiously, as the Falmart contingent got their first looks at the heavily modified VC-711 jet. Air Force One is the name given to any Air Force aircraft that carries the President of the United States of America, explained Scott, and he is the most protected man in the world. So we are going to America on that Pina asked almost frightfully, as the princess looked on at the blue and white aircraft with an worried expression on her face. Don't worry, fly is the safest form of travel in our world. Williams reassured her. Besides, this is the safest aircraft in the world. You are more likely to die in a car accident than you are in a plane crash. Somehow, Pina County Lotta did felt all that reassured by the Marine's statement. But she was still find the courage to climb up the stairway with the rest of the group and board the aircraft. When she did though, the princess was almost floored by just how comfortable the interior was. It was surprisingly roomy and the layout reminded her more like an imperial office than anything she was expecting. There's no way this heavy stuff flies, shouted Hamilton, who's now terrified to death. I'm telling you, this is madness. Ah, keep you panties on, lady, snorted Haruka, dragging her on board. Commander and I flied one of these birds with ease. Now get into it, dummy. Upon boarding, the group were greeted by the VC-711's flight crew, who proceeded to show the group to their seats. It was during this, that Shino soon found herself seated next to Williams, and it was not long before she realized that for the next 12 hours, she would be seated next to her secret senpai. Along with Rory, Lele and Tuka. This fact alone almost made her forget about Atami being an S, but at the very least she now had something else to focus on. Atami and Riza sat together across the cabin from the rest of the main group. Bozes sat together with Tomita, Pina with Scott, Panache with Taylor, and Hamilton with Haruka, Puller seated with Mamina, Karata with Persia, while Mayui sat with Setsuna. Eventually, the VC-711 powered up and began to taxi towards the runway. Much to the delight of Mayui and the discomfort to Pina and Hamilton, both of who were quickly realizing that they had a previously unknown fear of flying. But by the grace of Flair, the two Imperial women were able to control themselves as the Air Force jet thundered down the runway before lifting off into the sky to gain altitude. This caused Hamilton to freak out, as she believes that they're going to crash. But eventually, she calmed down as the VC-711 leveled off to begin its long trip to the United States. Amazing! Tuka gaped out in awe, as she and the girls could see the clouds below the aircraft's wings. By Flair, was all Pina could gasp out in reply, as she found it difficult to believe they were now flying through the sky like gods. These people had not only mastered flight without the use of magic or wyverns, but had seemingly perfected it. Pina had ridden a few wyverns that were a part of the Imperial Army, but never had they flown higher than the clouds. It must be the celestial realm, said Hamilton, looking at the clouds. This must be where the gods live, said Panache. Those clouds, said Bozes, they're so fluffy. I wanna walk on them, shouted Pina. Sorry, girls, replied Haruka, but those clouds are just gases. They can't hold you, as you fell onto the earth, like a rock. But we don't know it, until we try, said Panache. Believe me, we already known, said Scott. I've been jumping through clouds several times, and they didn't stop me from falling. But you're alive, Sir Mitchell, said Bozes. That's because I use a parachute, answered Mitchell. Hey, I have an idea, said Centurion. When we reach Russia, we can go skydiving. Skydiving? Surprised Lele. What's that? It's when you jumped out of the plane, explained Haruka, then you freefall through the clouds, and then deploy your parachute to land on the ground safely. Yes, said Michiru, and you can also strap another person to yourself, so you can both land safely. We'll do it, shouted the Imperials. Hey, what about me? Asked Rory, aren't you gonna take me? I wanna go too, said Lele. Count me in as well, said Tuka. Okay, it settles it, said Centurion, you're all invited. Yay, shouted the girls. I can wait to walk in the clouds, said Pina with almost childish glee in her eyes. But eventually the novelty wore off and soon the group relaxed and were actually able to enjoy the flight. The flight crew gave out drinks to their guests and even answered a few questions the Falmart natives had. Though Lele had to do most of the translating. It was not long before everyone fell asleep in their seats after a long day and settled for the night, while the VC-711 continued on through the sky. This is the end of part 11 of this What If. I hope you guys like it. Leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel to see more amazing contents.